I'm Joshua Hamilton. I began my career in Hope Mills around 2006, and I worked my way up to investigations around 2010. I was attending a really good friend of mine's wedding at Carolina Beach. The phone rings. It was a senior investigator telling me I needed to get back to Hope Mills, that there had been a homicide. I never know when I'm going to get called. So it was a disappointment to have to leave this wedding. But when the phone rings, you have to go. Left my family to enjoy their time at the beach and drove back to Hope Mills.
Yeah, Detective Hamilton and I were on our way back, but it's going to take us a few hours.
His partner, Detective Reagan, goes with him.
We coordinated with the officers at the scene. It was a matter of making sure that all the evidence was collected and properly handled.
I'm the sergeant of one of the 4 platoons on the road for Hope Mills Police Department. And on this particular morning, I was in charge. In my 24 years of service, I've never seen a homicide like this. When we first got the call, we figured it was a hiker or an early morning jogger that just had a heart attack.
When we got here, we found out it was a shooting.
The victim appears to be a teenager, has a shirt or an undershirt tied around his head as if it's a blindfold. Rigor mortis has begun. This body's been dead for more than a few hours and less than a day.
You could see bullet wounds in his body. There was a gash on the top of his head with skull fragments. It looked like he was hit with something on the head.
Let's roll him over, see if he's got any ID on him.
There was 2 projectiles that were found in the dirt underneath the body, as if they had, passed through the body and they were trapped in the dirt. That indicated to us that he was definitely killed in that location.
He did not have any ID on him, so it made it really tough for us to be able to find out why he was out there.
Finding the identity in an investigation is absolutely paramount. You can't establish a timeline. That creates a whirlwind of problems.
Sarge, we've got something over here.
So they work in the area with metal detectors, and they do find a group of expended casings.
The casings were all .380 caliber. It's a pretty common caliber, small, but there were a number of them, which told us we were dealing with a semi-automatic handgun.
We'll keep canvassing the area for a weapon. Good work.
Based on him being blindfolded, the position of the body, it looked as if it was an execution. This was explicitly done with intent and malice. They knew what they were doing when they did it.
Once they had finished processing what they could learn from the body, they would tag it at this point with a John Doe and transport him to the medical examiner in Raleigh so an official autopsy could be performed.
So we got home back to Hope Mills and we went out to the area of McKinnon Farm Road.
I started thinking about who, what, where, when, and why. I found that most homicides in general occur involve sex, money, or drugs. Those 3 things start going through my head.
Killers, for the most part, respond to normal human emotions. They're often remorseful afterwards. When you get somebody abnormal, which fortunately for all of us is a relatively rare thing, they don't need a reason. They kill because they like it. There's no more dangerous person than that.
How'd this kid get here?
I'm wondering, had he been kidnapped and taken to this location, robbed, shot?
We started creating theories of what could have happened. And we were all over the place, from some sort of gang initiation to a robbery or a drug deal going awry.
When there is no wallet or any paperwork of any kind, the first step is to try to get fingerprints from the hands to see if this person is in the criminal justice system.
Well, it's holiday weekend, but I'll make a phone call, see if I can't get someone in to check his prints.
Right. What's this?
Thinking maybe tire tracks in the suspect vehicle.
We had little tire tracks, but we also didn't know whose tire tracks belonged to who.
This is a dirt road where people go out there to four-wheel drive. We weren't sure if it was part of the crime scene or if this was kids playing and riding around in their ATVs.
Hey, detectives, I think I've got something over here.
Thank you.
We had located a baseball bat that was on the opposite side of the trail from where the victim was found.
There appeared to be blood and dirt on the tip of it, but they also thought it might have been red paint. This is a construction site. This is an area where kids could be playing.
Kids often attack construction areas by beating on things that aren't theirs and so on. Could it be some painted object somewhere that's where the red came from? It's hard to say, but it's there, so it cannot be ignored.
Looks like we have some company.
The media showed up. They listened to scanners. It's not uncommon for them to hear voices on the radio, and next thing you know, they're gonna show up.
The problem with that was that we didn't need them getting close and disturbing or destroying any evidence.
You're just gonna have to wait back by your van.
Can you just tell us what's going on?
Nope, not right now.
Well, Officer Whitmill is assigned to prevent them from interfering with the investigation. He notices a car. He's seen it a couple of times in the last few minutes driving back and forth near the crime scene.
We didn't know why they were there, what they were up to, so it was kind of odd that somebody would just show up there and watch us.
There's an old expression in law enforcement, it's called JDLR. Just doesn't look right.
That made us really suspicious that these might be the suspects.
It's not unusual for a suspect to return to the scene of a crime or even remain present at the scene of a crime to see what the police are up to.
I was notified that this car's driven by multiple times, so I had the officers initiate an investigative stop on the vehicle.
Hey, stop! Stop right there! Roll your window down. What are you guys doing out here right now?
Is there a problem, officer?
It's important to talk to them. Who are they, and what's their explanation for being in this area?
The officer was able to talk to the two people, and they said, we're just looking around, just kind of curious, that sort of thing.
They say, that's not against the law, is it? No, it's not. But you still confirm. You check it out.
They asked them where they were on the night of May 27th of 2016, where the car was.
He explains that they were in the military stationed at Fort Bragg. They verify that both men were on duty that night, and therefore they could not be involved in this homicide.
I think they were just being fairly nosy, wanted to know what was going on in the area. It all led back to nothing. Just got to continue to drive on and come up with something else.
So it's time to take the next step. They take prints from the remains of this young man to see if this person is in the criminal justice system.
And unfortunately, he had not been entered in the APHIS fingerprint system, which told us, one, we were dealing with a young person that possibly had never been in trouble.
He is a truly innocent victim.
Thank you.
We started searching missing person reports from neighboring jurisdictions.
I called almost every police department in the area, sheriff's office and police department, probably in a solid 30 to 50 mile radius of Hope Mills looking.
All of them come back, no missing reports matching his description.
I appreciate it.
At the present moment, our young man is nothing more than a ghost. No one seems to know who he is or where he's from.
It really gets frustrating because identifying your victim shouldn't be the hard part. The hard part should be trying to figure out who committed this heinous crime.
Well, Hamilton and Reagan have got this search underway. They re-canvass the neighborhood and make sure that no one saw or heard anything.
I want witnesses. I don't want people to start knocking on doors and talking to people. You're not going to know what people seen. You're not going to know what people heard until you start asking them, whether they want to talk to you or not. If they don't, A lot of times they'll take a card and call you later.
They run across a woman in the neighborhood about a half a mile away from the crime scene.
Oh, I did hear something. I'm in charge of our neighborhood watch group.
Oh, wow. She's the chairperson of the neighborhood watch group. She could be a great resource.
She was telling us that several people had posted on their community board about hearing shots fired in the area on Friday night.
Here it is.
He says he heard the gunshots just after 11:30 p.m.
Any others?
Yeah, let me find it. Here it is.
Just before midnight.
That is the first significant piece of information they have. They can now start building a timeline for this murder. But the question remains, who is John Doe?
While all this is going on, the victim had been transported to the offices of the Chief Medical Examiner in Raleigh.
As you can see, we got quite a few bullet wounds to the torso and upper body.
They learned the victim has suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the torso, the arm, and the right thigh.
He had been shot from different angles. That told me immediately that he was rolling around and he was alive when he took most of his shots. There was nothing quick about how he died.
But there's more evidence of assault here.
The skull had been deformed like it had been hit with a blunt object several times.
The chief medical examiner confirms that the cause of death was the blow to the head.
Excuse me, sorry. This is Hamilton.
When Hamilton's at the coroner's office, his cell phone rings. It's a friend of his from Oak County Sheriff's Department.
He told me that they had responded to a missing person report filed by Amanda Daniels. Amanda reported her brother missing.
It was for a 16-year-old young man, and his name was Andrew Dorenzi.
Thank you. We got a likely candidate. They're going to email me a picture sent by the kid's family.
She was able to send me a picture to my cell phone immediately, and when I seen the picture, I knew we were looking at the individual we were supposed to be. That was definitely him, without a doubt.
Here it is.
He takes his cell phone and holds it up next to the face on the morgue table. Oh, God. That's him. That's our kid. The first step is to make a death notification to the Dorenzi family.
Death notifications are the worst. Breaks your heart, especially you're dealing with a kid.
And we apologize for being here under these circumstances.
When they came up to the house, my sisters were there, and me and my husband.
We kind of knew what to expect. My whole drive home from work, I just cried and prayed and tried to figure out what was going on.
And we told the family that a body had been discovered and that we had some photographs that we'd like somebody to look at and see if they could identify the body.
My husband was like, I'll check it so they don't have to. And I'm a control freak, so I'm like, no, I'm going to look at this photo with you.
You can step over here, please.
So then Detective Hamilton pulled a phone out, and when he turned it on, there was a picture on there, and I could immediately tell it was Andrew.
They were both looking at the picture, and I could see by Amanda's expression on her face that it was him.
My stomach definitely dropped when I saw his face on the phone. The differences in the way he looked the last time I saw him alive to the way he looked in the picture was just kind of terrifying.
I just started crying. I fell to the floor. I kept screaming that this can't be real.
All I could do was hug on his sisters and let them know that, we were going to do everything we could to find out what happened to him and punish the ones who did it.
Nate and Amanda walked down the porch with me, and we started talking about Andrew.
Andrew was 14 when he came to live with us because my mom was having some health issues.
He just needed a place to have a better living environment than what his mother could give him.
So she ended up letting him come up and stay with us.
Amanda and I had 3 boys, and they just loved their Uncle Andrew.
He was definitely more like a bigger brother to them. It was beautiful. I was like, that's so cute. He's trying to teach him everything.
They explain he's 16 years old and he's very bright. He's homeschooled. He works 2 jobs.
He wanted to be a pilot. He just wasn't sure if he wanted to go the military route to do it or figure out his own way to pay for flight lessons to do it.
Do you recall the last time you spoke with Andrew?
Yeah, I just spoke with him Friday night.
I called and had to ask him for money. His car had broken down near McKinnon Farm Road, and he needed money to try to get a tow truck.
I explained to him that I didn't have any cash at the time, but I could come out to where he was and get his car fixed there. But he had told me that I didn't need to worry about that and that he was safe. And that was just kind of a weird thing for him to say at the time.
This call puts Andrew at the crime scene. But the question is, where is Andrew's car? Did the killer take it? They put on an APB and continue with their interview.
We learned that Andrew had a bank account that was linked to Amanda and Nate's bank account.
Huh. That's odd.
What's that?
Do you know anything about these withdrawals?
So we had seen that on Friday he had withdrawn $80 from his account, and then later on had moved $120 from Amanda's account to his and withdrew it.
I was like, what is he doing? This is not Andrew. He does not take money like that.
So that Saturday, we just continuously called him and texted him to try to figure out where he was, why he took all the money out of Amanda's account, and just couldn't get a hold of him.
Amanda kept thinking that maybe something was wrong with his phone. And Sunday, nobody heard from him, and we decided that Amanda should go file a missing persons report.
Could these bank withdrawals be linked to his murder? What if somebody is aware he has access to money and takes it under threat of death and then kills him anyway? Since he's homeschooled, they're going to ask, so who does he run with? Who does he spend his time with?
We had told the detectives that Andrew really only had one friend, and his name was Daniel.
And according to the family, Andrew actually moved in with Daniel a few weeks earlier.
Andrew was definitely an independent kid. He was kind of ready to get out on his own and start being an adult.
Hey. Hey, man. Thanks again for letting me stay here.
Yeah, it's cool. We're gonna grab something to eat. You guys wanna come with?
Yeah, I could eat. What about you? Sure. Let me just throw my stuff down.
We had met Daniel at the Fort Bragg Fair just a couple weeks prior to this. His mom was a bail bondsman, but we didn't really know much else about him.
When she said that, I knew exactly who she was talking about. There was only one female bondsperson that I was familiar with that had a son named Daniel.
They call her and they tell her they want to have a conversation with her son, Daniel. She agrees to set this meeting up at her office.
Hey, Mary.
Hey, come on back. We're glad to help you. Daniel's back here in the back office.
So they go in and sit down with Daniel.
Hey, thanks for meeting us.
Yeah, hi. What's all this about?
Daniel was 19 years old, clean cut, well dressed, and we told him while we were there that we wanted to talk about Andrew.
First thing out of his mouth was, yeah, I heard about Andrew. It's bad how he was left out in the woods like that.
It's really messed up, you know.
It was like light bulbs going off in my mind because we had never released to the media anything other than a death investigation. Not even that it was a man or a woman. So it told us he knew something more than what he should have.
So how does Daniel know that? Well, that is the million-dollar question. Daniel Hall has stated facts to Hamilton and Reagan that he could not reasonably know unless he was involved.
He said, you know, it's really messed up how they found him shot up like that.
So now alarm bells go off in their heads. Hamilton's alarms are ringing so loud he can't hear himself think.
I kind of glanced over at Regan, and I knew exactly he caught on to it too. We knew we were about to get something out of him at that point.
I heard you and Andrew were living together recently.
Yeah, me, Andrew, and my brother Devin. But it was just for a little while.
Hey, give me some of that.
Yeah, you got something to drink?
Yeah, I checked the fridge. You guys have any cash? We need to pay that electric bill.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
He said Andrew moved in with he and his brother Devin, but they were having trouble paying their bills.
You hear me, Andrew?
Yeah, I don't got it right now, but...
Daniel explains they were evicted the week before Andrew was found dead, and Andrew had not been seen by Daniel for that entire week.
It's an email from the bank. I'm gonna step outside a minute.
We know Andrew used an ATM late that night, so I was working in conjunction with the State Employees Credit Union.
The email informs him that they have reviewed the surveillance tapes for the time in question, and they have attached photographs to the email.
In the first image, there was Andrew standing at the ATM withdrawing money, and there was a silver Pontiac Sunfire in the background, obviously waiting on him.
In another picture, Hamilton sees a black male driving a different car. The most interesting fact in Hamilton's view is that Andrew is seated in the back passenger seat. There are others in the car, but Hamilton can't make them out.
We're dealing with a lot of people now. We just need to find out who these people are. I was super excited, jumping up and down when I got that picture. We had a lead.
Hamilton knows by his own experience he's probably looking at pictures of the people that killed Andrew Dorenzi.
We should keep going, George.
Wait. There's something that I need to tell you.
When Hamilton rejoins the group after reviewing his photos, Daniel, without being prompted, suddenly wants to change his story.
I picked him up.
I think Daniel realized real quick that we were going to be able to see those banking transactions and tell that they were together on that night.
So I began talking to Daniel, and he actually admits that he saw Andrew Friday night. He admitted that he drove a silver Pontiac Sunfire. He told me that he had picked Andrew up and they had gone to the ATM to get some money that Andrew owed him for a light bill from when he lived with him.
How much money? It was around $80. Okay, continue.
He said they got a milkshake. Then he took Andrew back to a guy named Ian Robinson's house to drop him off.
It's obvious to Hamilton and to Reagan that Daniel is all over the map with his story. First, he's convinced he hadn't seen him for a week, and all of a sudden he is convinced he saw him yesterday.
Anything Daniel said at that point needed to be corroborated. It's time to go track down Ian and see what Ian has to say.
We find Ian Robinson, and Ian agrees to talk.
Yeah, they were here that night.
His statement was Andrew and Daniel had left together in Daniel's car. They were gone for a short time, but did come back
Ian's telling us part truths and half truths, but he's not telling us the full truth.
So we got a little harder on him. I told Ian that whoever gets on the train first is going to get to ride. The DA's office was going to look for the most cooperative one, and lying was just going to make it worse.
Ian then says Daniel came running up to the front and said they grabbed Andrew and threw him in the car. They have him. But Daniel never said who they are.
I believe that Ian was not being 100% honest. To what level, I didn't know exactly. So Ian was offered a polygraph examination.
Yeah, whatever you need. Come on, gotta call work though. Hey.
I was like, awesome, let's do this. I set it up that day.
He thinks he can outsmart these detectives. Well, he has another thing coming.
Are we now in the state of North Carolina?
Yes.
Do you know how Andrew was killed?
No.
Do you know for sure who is responsible for Andrew's death?
No.
I'm able to sit in another room and actually watch the test. He's fidgeting around. He's having to be told to sit still. He's just clearly nervous.
Okay, we're all done. Just sit tight and I'll be right back.
The polygrapher came in and basically told me Ian knew way more than he was ever letting on.
Matter of fact, the polygraph examiner that did the examination has done more polygraphs than anybody else in the state of North Carolina and said it was one of the worst fails he'd ever seen.
So, of course, he got a post-polygraph interview. We didn't even go to a recorded room. We sat outside on the curb. I sat down next to him, and we just had a heart-to-heart. I just told him, look, man, this is the time. It's now or never. The cars were starting to stack against him. His demeanor started changing. That's when he pretty much told us what had happened.
He tells Hamilton that the first part of what he said is true, that Andrew and Daniel went to the ATM machine to get the money that Andrew owed for utilities payment.
He said while they were gone, Devin showed up at his house.
Screwed us to that apartment.
Dude, Andrew's out getting the money right now.
He needs to cough up more.
Devin said that he was going to kidnap Andrew.
Meeting my friends in a minute and buying a piece off of them.
What? A gun? Are you serious? I don't want any part of this.
I'm not asking you to do anything. Just keep your mouth shut.
Devin tells Ian, I'm going to take him to the ATM by force and make him pay me. And I'll give you $100 to look the other way.
Ian agreed to accept the $100. And all he knew was Devin did show up when they got back and took Andrew, put him into a car, and drove away.
That's when Hamilton recalls the car seen in the background on the second withdrawal picture.
You recognize this car?
He said he wasn't sure, but he had seen a red car that looked like that one at Devin and Daniel's apartment complex.
Oh, really? Daniel and his brother Devin are in this murder investigation up to their neck.
So now we need to get Devin and Daniel at this point. We make arrangements to start getting some reinforcements together to go over to Devin's apartment where they're living now.
Once we got there, we got notified that Daniel was leaving the house. So we instructed one of the officers to go ahead and stop him.
Here he comes, guys. Here he comes. Go, go, go.
Daniel, put your hands in the air. Put your hands in the air. Do not move. Do not move. Put your hands on your back.
He offers no resistance. It's almost as if he's resigned to the fact he's going to be arrested. He just slumps his shoulders and immediately turns around when they tell him to.
He was placed in the custody, put in a car, and transported to Fayetteville Police Department. Then we went with those officers to the apartment.
Everybody on your toes now.
Anytime you're walking up to an apartment like this, there's always some apprehension. This could go really wrong.
Once you kill once, after that it's only in numbers. Anyone who is responsible for the death of a human being is dangerous.
I hear him.
They knock loudly. They hear music and voices inside, no response at the door. What is coming through that door next? Bullets or a face? Hard to say. They're prepared for both. When they knock on the door the second time, they're prepared for whatever happens behind that door. But when the door opens, it's a tall kid with unkempt hair.
Are you Devin Hall?
Yeah? What's going on?
I'm gonna need you to come with us. Go. Your hands. Show me your hands. Show me your hands. Yeah.
They push the door open wider, and sitting on the sofa is a thin black male who looks remarkably like the guy in the ATM machine photo.
We had no idea we were looking for this guy, but that's the guy right there. We got eyes on him now.
Get up! Get up! What's your name? Darian Rebels. What kind of car you drive, Darian? A red Honda Accord. Why?
That's the very same car they saw in the bank photos.
He and Devin Hall were taken to the police department. I began securing search warrants for Darian's car, and then Detective Hamilton started conducting interviews.
I went to talk to Darian. Darian told me that he knew nothing about the homicide.
This is my first time ever being here. I've never murdered anybody, and I know just stuff like that.
Darian doesn't know he's Darian. The usual story. He doesn't know anything about anything. He doesn't know who Andrew is. Never seen anybody named Andrew, never been anywhere. Spent most of his life alone, apparently.
Do you really want to go this route? What route? First-degree murder? No, sir.
I can let you keep digging your own grave.
I laid a picture in front of him of the ATM showing him making a transaction with the victim's bank card. At that point, I just let him start talking.
Darian says that Devin Hall told him that Andrew had given money to Daniel when in fact he should have given it to him. And he's going to get this money from him no matter what it takes to do it.
Darian, being a good friend, said, hey, I'll go help you get that money. It's fine.
What were you doing?
I was driving. He took me to a house.
Darian says that Devin said he knew someone that had a gun for sale, and he was going to go get that gun and use it to threaten Andrew with to get his money.
They went and picked up Deontay Walker.
You got the piece?
Yeah, I got it.
Get in.
All right.
He got in the car. He was going to accompany that gun until they got the money. Darian said they showed back up over at Ian's, that Devin exited the car, approached Andrew with the gun, ordering that he come with him.
Andrew, get in the car.
I guess they got into some argument, I don't know. And then they all got in the car.
They left the area, told Andrew, you owe me money. Andrew tells him, just take me to an ATM. I'll give you all I can.
Give me your 10 bank card. Now, come on. Okay, here.
got up to the window and used the PIN number to withdraw $120, which is a maximum withdrawal from an ATM machine.
They leave that location when they go to McKinnon Farm Road. They pull down this dirt road. They all get out of the car.
And then it all happened. Ice and flashes. Gunshots.
And Darian says, I couldn't watch anymore at that point. I got back in the car. So Hamilton goes back and confronts Devin.
Your life is about to change. I'm gonna give you an opportunity to tell me exactly in your own words what happened and why things went so bad. Because at the end of the day, evidence don't lie.
Devin was a very cocky, arrogant individual. He felt that it was pure disrespect that Andrew didn't pay him his share of this debt that was a few $100 that they had to split.
I had called him, I was like, yo, I gotta get something, bro. I don't care what it is, but it can be $10, $15, da-da-da-da. And he was like, I was like, bro, are you serious?
So he came up with the idea to kidnap Andrew and get that money that he felt that he deserved.
Yeah, 120. It was 120. He handed me the money, and I was like, damn. I was really about to let him go. And I called my brother, and I was like, bro, I got the money. I got $120. And DJ was like, yeah, that's some money, but it's not enough.
They leave that location when they go to McKinnon Farm Road. They pull down this dirt road. They all get out of the car, trying to figure out how they're going to get more money.
You need to come up with some more money, bro. I don't care how you get it, but you better find it somehow.
I can't get you any more money.
Devin says, call your family and get more money. This is a conversation that Nate remembered. He tells him it's for a car problem, but it's really not for that. It's for Devin. That all fails.
New plan. Tell you what, if you do this, you're cool about it, we'll let you go. Put that on. Get in the car.
So Andrew basically puts a blindfold on himself, a shirt out of the back of the car. They put him in the trunk, and they begin to ride around a dirt road in an undeveloped subdivision.
How do we know he's not gonna say nothing? How are we sure that he's not gonna say anything? And I was like, bro, I'm gonna just have to do it.
Thank you for not killing me. Thank you. I thought you were gonna kill me. Thank you.
He gets Andrew out of the trunk, and Andrew even says to Devin, thank you for not killing me. And Devin says in reply, I got you, man.
I backed up and I fired 3 shots. And I heard him say, shoot me in my head.
Shoot me in my head!
So, shot 5 more times, like one and got all of them up.
Devin's angry. Angry that Andrew just won't die. And proceeds to pound on Andrew's head until he stops moving.
Do the golf, I mean, just do the bat, the wood, all the outlook, bro. We gonna take it on, take it off.
Devin was probably the coldest individual I've ever seen. He had no remorse for anything he had done. After the interview on him, he asked for one thing, to call his mom. So we called his mom, and I sat there and listened to him tell his mom that he's being charged with murder.
Mom. Baby. I just got charged with 1st-degree murder, 1st-degree kidnapping, 1st-degree armed robbery,
And I'm just watching this ripple effect of families ruined. Andrew's family's life's ruined. Now, Devin, as a parent, I'm just like, Jesus, my Lord.
3 men are charged with taking a 16-year-old boy to a dirt road in Cumberland County and killing him.
Police say it happened last weekend in Hope Mills. 18-year-old Devin Hall, 19-year-old Daniel Hall, and 20-year-old Darian Rebels all are of Fayetteville, and they're all charged in connection. Police are not identifying the 16-year-old victim. All 3 men are being held in the Cumberland County Detention Center.
One thing that was very interesting in this case is none of them had criminal records before this tragic homicide occurred. We spent a lot of time determining what was the appropriate level of culpability for each one of these individuals.
Devin Hall accepted a plea deal for first-degree murder, robbery with a dangerous weapon, first-degree kidnapping.
He received life in prison without the possibility of parole in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table.
Daniel Hall helped his brother Devin get Andrew's car away from Ian's house and sold the car. So Daniel pled guilty to accessory after the fact to kidnapping and received 3 years in jail. Ian Robinson accepted $100 for allowing Andrew to be kidnapped there at his house. He pled guilty to accessory after the fact to kidnapping and received about 2 or 3 years in jail.
Deontay Walker brought the gun to the equation.
He also pled guilty to accessory after the fact and received about 2 to 3 years in jail. Darian Rebels, the driver, pled guilty to armed robbery, conspiracy, and kidnapping and received about 10 years in prison for his role.
The hardest part about everything was knowing that the people involved, for the most part, they all knew Andrew and they knew the type of person he was. The world's missing a really great giver to humanity with Andrew gone.
When Andrew first moved in, my kids were always home, and he was trying to teach them work ethic and appreciating the small things and stuff. So that's actually one of the things I still miss, because for me, even though I lost him too, I know that relationship he had and how it affected the kids.
Detectives Hamilton and Reagan handled this case expertly. They pushed all the buttons and they pushed them in the correct order. They were able to resolve a mystery in relatively short order by doing what homicide detectives do. One foot in front of the other. One fact to the next fact. Until you have the right faces in front of you. Precisely what they did in this case. And what they've done in every case. Andrew Dorenzi was an innocent person who wanted to be a pilot. Died before his 17th birthday. Died before he ever took the controls of an aircraft that he dreamed about all his life.
I still don't think that it's really hit me that I'm never going to see him again. It really doesn't make sense.
With any homicide, it never goes away. Someday, I'll retire from this career, God willing. And I'll carry to the grave any and all homicides I've worked in my time. The circumstances and the devastation that they all created, you think about them all the time.
It began on a Sunday morning. The kind of quiet Kansas dawn that carries no hint of what's coming. The fields outside Emporia were still wet with dew, the air sharp and motionless, and somewhere between the highway and the tree line, a truck driver noticed something pale against the ditch. At first he thought it was a deer carcass. It wasn't. The shape was too small, too human. When he stopped, the silence deepened. What he saw in that still water would mark the beginning of one of Kansas's longest unsolved mysteries. The sheriff's office arrived within 30 minutes. The woman was young. Early 20s, maybe, wearing a torn sundress, her skin drained of color by the cold ditch water. There was no ID, no purse, no car nearby. The body had been there for hours, maybe days. But what caught investigators first wasn't the absence of clues. It was the strangest thing. Her shoes, perfectly clean, placed neatly beside the body. Not thrown, not lost. Placed. Someone had arranged them there, side by side, like an offering. They called her Jane Doe for months. Autopsy found bruising, restraint marks, water in the lungs, but no clear cause of death. No sexual assault, no fingerprints in the national database. The coroner wrote, drowning, undetermined manner. Locals whispered theories, a runaway, a hitchhiker, a ritual killing. Farmers swore they'd seen strange headlights near the drainage fields that week. The sheriff's deputies combed the area for tire tracks. Nothing matched. The road itself seemed to swallow every trace of who she was and how she got there. The small town moved on, but not everyone forgot. Detective Harold Whitman didn't. He was 38 then, quiet, methodical, the kind of man who kept old coffee stains on his case files because he never threw anything away. He'd been the one to tag the evidence bag that held her shoes. White canvas sneakers, women's size 7. When he retired in 2008, those sneakers were still sitting in the evidence locker, faded, fragile, and unanswered. But to understand how this case survived 4 decades, you have to understand how it haunted everyone who touched it. Emporia was not a place for mysteries. It was wheat, church bells, slow news cycles. When the county paper printed the headline, "Young Woman Found Dead in Drainage Ditch," it didn't even make the front page. A local car dealership ad ran beside it. 2 weeks later, there was another story. Sheriff's office seeks leads. And then nothing. The story sank. But in the homes around Leon County, it lingered. Kids dared each other to walk the ditch road at night. People said they heard crying near the tree line. The kind of folklore that grows out of unanswered questions. Somewhere between fear and fascination, the town folded her memory into its identity, the nameless girl by the ditch. Whitman, though, couldn't let it rest. He'd been on the case since day one. He'd photographed the scene, written the reports, sat through the autopsy. He remembered the exact temperature that morning, 48 degrees, the exact smell of wet soil mixed with diesel. He had theories, quiet ones he never said out loud. One of them involved a truck driver who'd vanished the following year. Another involved a motel off I-35 where a guest registered under the name L. Brooks never checked out. But without DNA, without a witness, without a match, it was just static. By the early 2000s, most of the evidence had decayed. The coroner's photos were yellowing. The body, long buried under the marker Jane Doe, 1981, was thought to be untraceable. Then came 2023, and a new generation of investigators who didn't believe in dead ends. Cold case detective Erin Mallory wasn't born when the body was found. She grew up 2 towns over, the daughter of a state trooper who'd taught her that every lie leaves a residue. When she reopened the Emporia file, she was struck by how incomplete it felt. The grainy photos, the lack of interviews, the way the evidence list stopped abruptly after entry number 17. Entry number 18, handwritten but never logged, simply read, sample, cloth fiber, ankle area. The physical item was missing. Mallory requested the archive boxes from the county storage site, the kind with dust so thick it looks like snow. Most boxes were water-stained. Some were sealed with brittle tape. But in one, wrapped inside a crumpled grocery bag, she found a glass vial with something inside. A single hair, barely visible. Someone had preserved it, unofficially. No label, no tag, just a hair that might have fallen during the original evidence handling. She sent it to the state lab in Topeka, expecting nothing. The backlog was months long. But 3 weeks later, her phone rang. A partial mitochondrial match had been found, not to any known offender, but to a family line in the National Genealogy Database. A family in Wichita with a missing daughter reported in 1981. The name, Linda Brooks. The file said Linda had disappeared while hitchhiking from Wichita to Kansas City for a job interview. Her parents died in the 90s, never knowing what happened. Her brother, still alive, had uploaded his DNA to a public site for ancestry research. The match wasn't definitive, but it was enough to reopen every scar the town had buried. Mallory drove to Wichita that same afternoon. The brother, Mark Brooks, was 62, retired mechanic, the kind of man whose grief had calcified into silence. When Mallory told him about the ditch, about the shoes, about the hair, he didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said, "Linda never wore shoes without socks. Whoever took her shoes off didn't know her." That line lodged in Mallory's head like a nail. She re-examined every photo, the placement of the shoes, the undisturbed mud, the way the right shoe's laces were tucked inward, not outward. Someone had placed them from the left side facing the body, left-handed. She checked the old interview notes. Whitman had written decades ago that a left-handed man from a nearby farm was questioned early on but released. His name, Samuel Dwyer. Dwyer was a farmhand who'd worked seasonal routes in 1981. He'd left Kansas in 83, arrested later in Oklahoma for petty theft. The file didn't connect him to Linda. But when Mallory traced his last known address, she discovered something impossible. Dwyer had died in 2011, cremated, ashes scattered in Emporia Lake. But his son David was still alive. David Dwyer, 43, local delivery driver, no criminal record. When investigators ran his DNA against the hair sample, the result came back consistent with a paternal match. That meant one thing. Either Samuel or someone from his direct line had been at that ditch. It didn't prove murder, but it shattered 42 years of silence. By the time the results came through, word had already spread. Local TV ran a brief segment, New Evidence in 1981 Jane Doe Case. But the headlines missed what mattered most. Not the science, not the data, but the way the town reacted. Emporia wasn't ready to believe that one of its own might have been involved. Neighbors whispered that the Dwyers were hard-working, church-going people. Others said they always knew something was off about that family. Mallory didn't care about gossip. She wanted truth. She wanted to stand at that ditch again, 40-plus years later, and feel what Whitman must have felt. She did. One evening in late October, as the sun sank and the soy fields turned red, she parked near the exact mile marker where the body was found. The landscape hadn't changed much, the same stretch of dirt road, the same hush after the wind. She stood there, imagining a young woman stepping off the highway, tired, maybe hopeful, then a car stopping, a stranger's voice, and then nothing. The silence of that place is its own kind of violence. Mallory reopened every box, every scrap of paper. One thing kept bothering her. Why was the hair found near the ankle? If it had fallen naturally, it should have been on the head, the shoulder, the clothing. But the ankle, that meant contact. Someone had touched her legs, maybe to move her, maybe to stage her. And if someone staged her, then the shoes weren't just placed. They were performed. A ritual, a signature, an act of control. Forensic analysis of the shoes showed something missed in 1981. Tiny flecks of motor oil on the laces. The same type used in agricultural combines, specifically the Dwyer Farms machinery at the time. Records confirmed it, but every potential witness was dead or gone. No one remembered Samuel Dwyer, no one except Harold Whitman, who was now 81, living in a nursing home in Topeka. When Mallory visited him, he barely spoke. His memory drifted in fragments, but when she showed him a photo of the sneakers, his hand trembled. "I tagged those," he whispered. "We knew it wasn't random. We just couldn't prove it." She asked him why the case went cold. He closed his eyes. "Because the sheriff told us to drop it, said the family had friends in the county office." That was the first time corruption entered the frame. Mallory checked the old sheriff's name, Earl Rankin, retired, deceased, but his brother, John Rankin, still served as a county commissioner. In 1981, the Dwyers rented land from the Rankin family. The dots weren't direct, but they formed a shadow that stretched across decades of small-town politics. By early 2024, the case was no longer just about identifying Linda Brooks. It was about uncovering why she had to remain Jane Doe for 42 years. Mallory knew the answer was somewhere between the silence of that ditch and the silence of those who wanted the file to stay buried. And that's where the story turns, where the past begins to speak again, louder than anyone expected. The night after visiting Whitman, Detective Erin Mallory sat in her car outside the Lyon County Archive building, headlights off, listening to the ticking of the engine. She had a key, a warrant, and a hollow feeling in her chest that no procedure could fill. Somewhere inside that old brick vault lay the rest of the truth. Pages that had never been filed, notes that someone had deliberately folded out of sight. She'd been warned by the deputy chief to keep expectations realistic. But realism was exactly what killed this case in 1981. Realism meant small-town loyalties, handshake deals, and looking the other way when the wrong name surfaced. She didn't want realism. She wanted the crack of light that appeared when people thought the dark was permanent. The boxes were heavier this time. Decades of dust, brittle tape, faded signatures. She stacked them under a single hanging bulb that buzzed like an insect. One file, marked Supplemental Report, November 1981, carried a coffee stain identical to those on Whitman's originals. Inside were field sketches, Polaroids, and a memo stamped Withheld. The paper listed the sheriff's initials, ER, and a note. Dwyer Farm inspected, no evidence collected. Beneath it, a second line written in different pen. Per instruction, discontinue inquiry. No signature, no reason. The ink looked hurried, almost panicked. Mallory photographed every page. The deeper she went, the more the narrative shifted, from investigation to maintenance, from truth-seeking to reputation-protecting. The final page wasn't typed. It was handwritten in pencil. It said only, she wasn't supposed to be found there. The next morning, she drove to the Dwyer property, 20 miles south of Emporia. The farmhouse stood abandoned, windows boarded, fields overtaken by weeds. A rusted mailbox leaned under the weight of names erased by rain. She crossed the yard slowly, recording everything. In the barn, she found machinery parts, combines, axle grease, cans of motor oil identical to the residue on Linda's shoes. The smell of iron and soil was overwhelming. And then, in the corner, under a pile of discarded tarp, she saw a wooden crate. Inside were metal hooks, chains, and something worse, a strip of floral fabric with faded blue petals. It matched the pattern from Linda's sundress in the coroner's photo. Her heart steadied into something mechanical. She radioed for evidence collection, marking coordinates. The discovery would need confirmation, chain of custody, lab analysis. But even before forensics touched it, Mallory knew this wasn't coincidence. Someone had moved the body away from the farm. Someone had chosen the ditch deliberately, a place visible enough to be found, but far enough to mislead. The news hit the State Bureau 2 days later. Fabric found in Dwyer barn, linked to 1981 homicide. The headline ran small in the Emporia Gazette, but online it spread fast. The comments section turned savage. Half the readers defended the Dwyer family name. The other half demanded answers. A local pastor went on record saying, "It's time the dead stop hiding the dead." Mallory didn't care about noise. She cared about patterns. The pattern was power. The Dwyers had worked the Rankin land. The Rankins had controlled county contracts for 40 years. In 1981, the same year Linda vanished, the Rankins secured a massive road grading deal near the drainage fields, the very road where her body appeared. She mapped the timeline. The body found in April, the contract signed in May, the sheriff's report closed in June, neat, efficient, buried. When she presented her findings to the bureau chief, he frowned. "You're suggesting a cover-up that spans 4 decades. That's a stretch, Mallory." She leaned forward. "It's not a stretch if every name in the file worked for the same people." He told her to tread carefully, that reputations mattered, that the Rankin family still funded county initiatives. But she'd already crossed that line. She reopened the witness list, looking for anyone still alive. Out of 23 original interviewees, only 4 remained. 3 refused contact. The 4th agreed, on one condition: no recordings, no names. His name was Ralph Nolan, a retired tow truck driver. They met at a diner off Highway 50. He was thin, nervous, eyes darting toward the windows. Over a cup of black coffee, he told her he'd been the first called to haul the sheriff's vehicle the morning the body was found. "The truck wasn't stuck," he said. "They made me move it for show. Sheriff wanted it to look like they'd been patrolling out there all night, but that mud on the tires, too dry. He'd just arrived." Mallory asked why he never said this before. He smiled without humor. "You didn't talk about Rankins back then, you just kept working." When she left the diner, rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then heavy enough to blur the windshield. She sat in the parking lot replaying his words. If the sheriff had staged his own presence at the scene, the entire foundation of the original report collapsed. It meant the timeline was fabricated. The discovery time, the response, even the photographs might have been altered. The story wasn't about who killed Linda. It was about who rewrote her death. She filed a motion for exhumation. The county court approved it reluctantly. In December 2024, after 43 years underground, Linda Brooks was unearthed. The coffin was weathered, the marker barely legible. Forensic specialists extracted new DNA samples from bone fragments. Inside the coffin, alongside the remains, they found something unexpected. A fragment of a torn photograph, half of a Polaroid showing a young woman smiling beside a pickup truck. On the truck door, faint letters: Dwyer Farms, Emporia, KS. That image was the missing heartbeat. The state lab confirmed the match. The woman in the photo was Linda Brooks, age 21. Time stamped March 1981, weeks before her death. The photographer was unknown. Mallory stared at the photo for hours. The smile looked real, unforced. Whatever happened after that picture was taken happened fast. When she traced the serial number on the truck, she discovered it had been sold at auction in 1983 and later scrapped, but the sale receipt carried a witness signature, J. Rankin. At this point, the case file became radioactive. The county attorney requested temporary transfer of evidence, citing jurisdictional overlap. Mallory refused. She locked the materials in a state facility. Within 48 hours, an internal memo ordered her reassignment pending review for procedural overreach. She knew what that meant. They were trying to bury it again. She didn't step back. Instead, she leaked the findings anonymously to a regional journalist, Mara Kendall, known for exposing law enforcement corruption. The story hit the airwaves under the headline, "Kansas Cold Case Tied to 1980s Sheriff's Office Cover-Up." Overnight, the narrative changed. The Bureau had no choice but to reinstate Mallory and announce a full inquiry. Protesters gathered outside the county courthouse holding signs, "Justice for Linda" and "No more quiet ditches." For the first time, Emporia spoke out loud about what it had ignored for generations. But attention comes with cost. 2 weeks later, someone broke into Mallory's car. Nothing stolen, except her notebook. The thief left a single object on the seat, a rusted key. Attached to it was a faded tag that read Unit 9. She recognized the handwriting instantly, Whitman's. Unit 9 was a storage container at the old sheriff's impound lot, decommissioned years ago. When she pried it open, the air smelled of dust and gasoline. Inside were relics of forgotten cases, typewriters, radios, a stack of unlabeled reels. One box, marked April 1981, contained a film canister. She threaded it through an old projector. Grainy footage flickered to life, sheriff's deputies standing beside the ditch, a body half covered, camera panning slowly. Then, in the frame, a man, broad-shouldered, wearing a sheriff's jacket, bends down and adjusts something near the shoes. When he stands, the badge catches the light. Sheriff Earl Rankin. Her pulse hammered. The footage had never been logged, never mentioned. It proved manipulation of the crime scene. She digitized it, sealed it, and sent copies to 3 locations: the Bureau, the Attorney General, and the journalist who had published her story. Within a week, statewide news carried the headline, "Lost Film Links Former Sheriff to 1981 Jane Doe Scene." The town's reaction was volcanic. Old officers went on television denying knowledge. Rankin's descendants hired lawyers, calling the footage deepfake propaganda. The Rankin Family Foundation withdrew funding from local schools. Emporia divided overnight, half clinging to nostalgia, half demanding justice. Through it all, Mallory kept moving. The investigation, once frozen in yellowed files, now burned like wildfire. The lab confirmed oil residue on the fabric-matched samples from Dwyer machinery. The photograph fragment showed not just Linda and the truck, but a reflection in the chrome bumper, a man holding a camera. When enhanced, the outline resembled the same jacket seen in the footage. Everything pointed back to Rankin, but proving murder after 4 decades meant finding what the sheriff had hidden. She combed through property deeds, financial statements, even church donation logs. One entry caught her attention, a parcel of land transferred in 1982 from the Rankin family to a shell company, one that dissolved a year later. The location? Adjacent to the Dwyer farm. The supposed buyer, Midwest Road Solutions. She cross-referenced the company officers. One name surfaced, Samuel Dwyer. That was the missing intersection, the moment where authority and anonymity met. The sheriff had suppressed evidence not to protect Dwyer, but to protect himself. Maybe an affair gone wrong, maybe an accidental death, maybe something darker. The motive didn't matter yet, the link did. As she drove back toward Emporia, clouds rolled over the fields, the light flattening into steel. 43 years had turned evidence into rumor, rumor into legend. Now it was turning legend back into proof. But every revelation carried echo. Whitman died that week, quietly, before Mallory could tell him they were close. His final note, found in his bedside drawer, read, "She deserved to have her name back." The next morning, Mallory stood again at the ditch where it all began. The road was cracked, grass high, the same haunting quiet. For the first time since 1981, a new sign stood there, white metal, black letters, Linda Brooks Memorial Site. Someone, maybe a local volunteer, had placed fresh flowers beneath it. The scent of soil and rain mixed in the air. She thought of the shoes, the hair, the years of silence collapsing into sound. Behind her, the hum of an approaching car. A black sedan slowed, window lowering just enough for a voice to call out, "Some things are better left in the ground." The car rolled off before she could see the face. She didn't chase it. She only watched the taillights disappear into the wheat horizon, knowing the story wasn't over, that in Kansas, ghosts drive quietly. And somewhere in the dark, the last piece of the puzzle waited to surface. By the time the footage of Sheriff Earl Rankin reached the state attorney's office, the storm had already broken. Television vans lined the courthouse square, reporters fought for sound bites, and Emporia, once a quiet patch of Midwestern calm, had become the epicenter of a national scandal. Headlines screamed of corruption, cover-ups, and the long shadow of small-town power. But for Detective Aaron Mallory, none of it felt like victory. It felt like exposure, like standing under a single bulb while unseen eyes watched from the dark. The night after the broadcast, she noticed her apartment door ajar. Inside, nothing stolen, but on her table sat a manila envelope. No address, no note, just a single photograph inside, grainy, printed from a security camera. It showed her, leaving the archive building a week earlier. Someone was keeping track, someone who wanted her to know. She didn't call it in. Instead, she poured coffee, turned off the lights, and sat by the window, watching the reflection of street lamps ripple over the wet asphalt. Emporia was too small to hide in, but too tangled to leave. Everything, her badge, her case, her purpose, was rooted here. She thought of Whitman's last note, of the words, "She deserved to have her name back." In that sentence lay both burden and permission. The next morning, she went to the State Bureau's Wichita branch to present her findings. The air inside felt colder than the weather outside. Her supervisor, Chief Alan Barris, met her with a strained smile. "Mallory," he said, "there's pressure coming from the top. The governor's office wants us to de-escalate until the inquiry runs its course." "De-escalate?" she repeated, disbelief tightening her jaw. "You've got footage of a sheriff contaminating a crime scene, a death linked to his land lease, and the only suspect's DNA tied to the body. What's left to de-escalate?" Barris looked past her. "You've made powerful enemies. Rankin's relatives have lawyers who can outlast God. Let the politics breathe. Take a few days off." She didn't respond. She simply gathered her folders, left the office, and drove without direction until the highway bled into endless fields. Somewhere out there, between the noise of engines and the whisper of wheat, she realized she wasn't investigating a crime anymore. She was dismantling an illusion, the illusion that truth survives without guardians. That night, she met journalist Mara Kendall in a diner off the interstate, the same place she'd met Ralph Nolan weeks earlier. The neon sign flickered, throwing red light across their table. Mara looked exhausted but fierce, her laptop open, voice low. "They're trying to discredit us," she said. "Anonymous calls, claims the footage was fabricated. Someone leaked my tax records online. It's coordinated." Mallory nodded. "Then we hit harder. There's more to find." Mara leaned in. "You're still missing motive. Rankin was the sheriff. Dwyer was a laborer. Why cover for him?" Mallory exhaled slowly. Because maybe Rankin wasn't covering for Dwyer. Maybe Dwyer was covering for him. It was a theory built from fragments, but the fragments fit. Linda Brooks was last seen hitchhiking toward Kansas City, but the direction placed her right along Rankin's patrol route. The photograph with the Dwyer truck could have been taken at the farm, but what if she'd never meant to go there? What if someone she trusted offered her a ride first? Someone in uniform. The next day she pulled Rankin's old personnel file. The record was spotless. Commendations, awards, perfect attendance. But there, in a 1980 memo, she noticed something small. An expense request for off-site patrol fuel reimbursement during March and April. Dates that overlapped with Linda's disappearance. The location, County Road 17, the same stretch where her body was found. Mallory traced the gas station receipts. Most were routine, but one stood out. A handwritten signature that wasn't Rankin's usual looping scrawl. It was neater, hesitant, a signature written by someone imitating authority. Dwyer. The pattern clicked. Rankin and Dwyer had both been present near the scene in the days before the body's discovery. Rankin had the badge. Dwyer had the silence. Maybe Rankin picked Linda up. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe Dwyer helped move the body to the ditch in exchange for protection. When the investigation started, Rankin buried the evidence, and Dwyer's guilt became his insurance. Mallory drove to the Dwyer property again, this time with a search warrant for adjoining land parcels. On the third day of excavation, forensic teams uncovered a rusted oil drum half buried near the tree line. Inside were charred fragments of paper, metal, and plastic. Lab testing revealed traces of photographic film emulsion. Someone had burned photos, lots of them. When developed from residue, only one partial image survived, the back of a man's head beside a patrol car, a badge glinting on his belt. That was enough for probable cause. The state attorney signed off on reopening the Rankin inquiry as a formal corruption case. But the closer Mallory got, the more resistance grew. Files went missing, requests delayed. The Bureau's server malfunctioned, erasing her audio recordings from Whitman's interviews. The past wasn't just haunting, it was fighting back. Then came the call. It was 2:47 a.m. when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. A voice, deep, calm, distorted through static. "You're digging in the wrong field, detective." A click, then silence. She stared at the phone screen until her own reflection blurred. The next morning, she filed a formal report. No traceable source, no call record. The number didn't exist. 2 nights later, journalist Mara Kendall's car was found torched outside her home. She survived, barely, pulled out by neighbors before the flames reached the cabin. Arson investigators found a melted plastic container near the driver's door. Inside the residue, a fingerprint, unidentifiable. But in the ash, a small metal badge pin, half melted, with 3 visible letters, ran. The attack changed everything. The story was no longer a scandal. It was a siege. National media flooded Emporia. Federal oversight arrived, and yet, inside the chaos, Mallory felt the quiet tightening of danger, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that waits. She visited Mara in the hospital. The journalist's face was bandaged, voice weak but steady. "Don't stop," she whispered. "He's still out there." "He?" Mallory asked. Mara's eyes fluttered. "The man who came to my door last night said he was from the sheriff's office. Badge number I didn't recognize. When I asked for ID, he smiled and said, 'I'm just here to remind you this isn't your story.' Then he left." Mallory's gut turned to stone. There hadn't been a sheriff's deputy assigned to Mara's protection detail. Whoever visited her came from somewhere else, maybe private security, maybe legacy Rankin contacts. The line between law and threat had blurred completely. That week, she received a brown package mailed from Topeka, no return address. Inside was a single cassette tape labeled April 1981, Dispatch 03. She found an old player and pressed play. Static, then voices. Young, clipped, professional. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12, visual on subject. Female, white, early 20s, eastbound shoulder. Copy Unit 12. Confirm assistance? Negative, she's fine. Probably heading to the junction." Pause. "Unit 12, confirm location? County Road 17, near Dwyer property. Static, then, faintly. She said she's waiting for the sheriff. Mallory froze. The voice was unmistakably Rankin's. That tape was the missing bridge, the moment before the crime, the confirmation of contact. It tied Rankin directly to Linda Brooks. But it also revealed something else, premeditation. She'd been waiting for him. That meant they'd met before. She combed through phone directories, civic logs, community rosters from the late 1970s. Finally, buried in a local charity event flyer, she found a name. Linda Brooks, volunteer, Emporia Youth Safety Drive. Guest speaker listed that day, Sheriff Earl Rankin. It was all there, in plain sight. A brief encounter that led to familiarity, then trust, then betrayal. He'd used his authority not to protect, but to prey. Mallory's report to the State Bureau ran 147 pages. The evidence was airtight, but prosecution required proof of life-to-death connection. Without a confession or physical remains linking Rankin's direct action, it risked dismissal as circumstantial. That's when she remembered something Whitman once said. Rankin always hid what mattered most where nobody looked twice. She returned to Rankin's old property, now owned by his nephew. The man was polite but guarded. The barn was gone, replaced by storage sheds. But behind the main house, under a line of elm trees, stood an old storm shelter sealed with a rusted padlock. The key, impossibly, matched the one left in her car weeks earlier, the one tagged Unit 9. Inside the shelter, the air was dense, heavy with earth and mildew. Her flashlight cut through the dark, landing on stacked wooden crates. Inside, sealed in plastic, were hundreds of photographs, Polaroids, negatives, files, not of Linda Brooks, of others. Dozens of young women, unnamed, unidentified, some smiling, some clearly afraid. It wasn't one case, it was a pattern. And on the inside of the door, scratched into the metal, were 4 words. This is where silence begins. She called it in. Backup arrived within minutes. The shelter was declared a crime scene. The evidence was overwhelming. Rankin wasn't a single act of corruption. He was a predator cloaked in law. The Dwyers were his accomplices by fear, by dependence, by silence. But even as agents swarmed the property, Mallory felt the same old unease. The car that had followed her before was parked at the edge of the property again. Same black sedan, windows tinted. When she walked toward it, it drove away, leaving only the echo of tires on gravel. That night, under the sodium lights of the Bureau parking lot, she stood with Mara Kendall, who had left the hospital against orders. The 2 women didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The world was finally listening. But the truth, once freed, carries its own ghosts. Somewhere out there, others who'd kept quiet for 40 years were starting to talk. Others who wanted the silence back were starting to move. And for Aaron Mallory, the case wasn't closing, it was widening. Because when one cold case melts, it reveals everything buried beneath the ice. By the time the storm shelter photographs reached federal hands, the story had outgrown Emporia. The FBI arrived under floodlights, caravans of unmarked SUVs, satellite trucks parked along the dirt road. Flashbulbs turned the Kansas night white. The locals stood behind barricades watching as agents carried out boxes of evidence sealed in red tape. For the first time in 43 years, the town that had whispered about the girl in the ditch spoke her name out loud, Linda Brooks. But in the echo of her name, other names began to form, faces in those photographs that no one yet recognized. Detective Aaron Mallory watched from the sidelines, credentials clipped to her jacket, exhaustion carved deep into her face. She'd been placed under joint task supervision, which meant she was both essential and expendable. The Bureau wanted her knowledge, but not her independence. When Special Agent Thompson introduced himself, his handshake was polite, firm, and already impatient. From here on out, he said, everything goes through Washington, we'll coordinate updates. She nodded, knowing what it meant. She was being cut out of her own case. Still, she stayed. She stood in the cold wind as evidence technicians cataloged each photograph. Out of more than 200 images, 60 showed identifiable backgrounds. Gas stations, picnic areas, patrol cars. 20 showed women whose disappearances matched unsolved cases across 3 states. It wasn't just Kansas anymore. It was a corridor of silence stretching across the Midwest. Inside the temporary command tent, Thompson laid out the photos across the table. We're calling it the Rankin Network, he said. Looks like he used his jurisdiction to traffic victims between counties. Couldn't have done that alone. Mallory stared at the images. He didn't. He had deputies, farmers, truckers, men who owed him favors. Or owed him fear, Thompson added. Either way, we're talking about organized predation under color of law. Those words hung in the air like a sentence too heavy to speak twice. When the press conference began the next morning, the town square filled with reporters. Thompson gave the official statement. We have uncovered substantial evidence suggesting systemic misconduct involving former Sheriff Earl Rankin and possible accomplices. This investigation is ongoing. He thanked the community for their cooperation. He didn't mention Mallory's name. She didn't expect him to. But that night her phone rang again. Unknown number. A male voice. Calm. Measured. You think the shelter was the end? That was his decoy. The real archive's somewhere no badge will look. Before she could ask who it was, the line went dead. She traced the call. It bounced off 3 towers, untraceable. Yet something about the voice felt familiar, like gravel underfoot. She played the recording again and froze. In the background, faintly, was the low hum of hospital machinery. Someone calling from inside the state facility, someone who'd seen too much. She drove through the night to Topeka General, checked patient logs. There was one name that hit her like an echo, David Dwyer, Samuel's son, the man whose DNA had first cracked the case. He'd been admitted 2 nights earlier after an accidental fall. Head trauma, critical condition, listed under protective custody. Mallory flashed her badge at the nurse's station and stepped into the dim hospital room. Dwyer lay unconscious, tubes winding from his arms. The monitor beeped steadily. On the bedside table lay a small plastic bag of personal items, a lighter, a wallet, and a folded photograph. She opened it carefully. It showed a teenage boy standing beside a patrol car, smiling proudly while a man, Rankin, rested a hand on his shoulder. On the back, a handwritten note, "For helping me keep the county safe." She felt the cold spread through her chest. Dwyer hadn't just been an accomplice's son. He'd been groomed, pulled into Rankin's orbit since childhood. Protection, obedience, inheritance. When she looked up, Dwyer's eyes were open. Clouded, frightened, his lips moved, dry and uncertain. "He kept everything," he whispered. "Not in the shelter, under the road." "Which road?" Mallory asked. But the monitor flatlined before he could finish. The next morning, autopsy ruled cardiac arrest. Mallory didn't believe it. She drove straight to the highway map pinned in the task tent. "Under the road," she muttered. Rankin had supervised infrastructure projects for decades. Bridges, drainage systems, resurfacing contracts. The same roads where victims vanished. She traced his construction permits. One stood out. County Road 17 reconstruction, approved 1982, the same year the case closed. She pulled the blueprints from county archives. They showed an unregistered culvert beneath the south lane, listed as maintenance conduit, sealed. She drove there before dawn, headlights cutting through fog. The stretch was deserted, silent except for wind moving through the wheat. She parked, climbed down the embankment, and found the culvert mouth hidden by overgrown grass. The padlock was old, corroded, but still there. She broke it open. Inside, the air was cold and metallic. Her flashlight beam caught shapes, metal cabinets bolted to the wall, all labeled in Rankin's handwriting. Inside were more photographs, reel tapes, and folders marked with initials, victims' names, counties, dates. Each file corresponded to an unsolved disappearance between 1975 and 1983. Rankin hadn't kept trophies. He'd kept control. Evidence of others' crimes traded for silence, a ledger of leverage. She called Thompson immediately. By the time agents arrived, she'd cataloged over 300 files. The culvert became federal property overnight. But as she handed over the evidence, she noticed Thompson's expression, admiration laced with caution. "You've done extraordinary work," he said. "Now let us handle it from here." She didn't argue, but inside she knew what "from here" meant. Bureaucracy, delays, dilution, truth turned into paperwork. 2 days later, news broke that the files contained connections to at least 6 other sheriffs across 3 states. A web of shared cover-ups, each protecting the other through favors and blackmail. Reporters called it the silent highway ring. Politicians called it isolated incidents. But for the families who'd waited decades, it was revelation and horror at once. That week, Mallory returned to Emporia to visit Linda Brooks' memorial. The sign was still there, flowers fresher than before. Someone had tied a note to the post, for every name he buried. She stood there as dusk settled, thinking about how evil survives, not through violence alone, but through the quiet that follows it. Behind her, a car door shut softly. She turned. Agent Thompson approached, hands in his coat pockets. "We've identified 2 deputies still alive who worked under Rankin," he said. "One's in Texas, one's right here in Kansas. We're bringing them in." "Which one's local?" He hesitated. "Deputy Miles Reese runs a private security firm now. You might want to sit this one out." "I'm not sitting anything out," she said. That evening, they visited Reese's office, a squat concrete building on the edge of town. The lobby smelled of gun oil and stale coffee. Reese greeted them with forced warmth. He was in his 70s now, hair silver, posture straight as ever. "Hell of a mess you've stirred," he said. "Just cleaning one," Mallory replied. Reese chuckled, poured coffee, didn't drink it. "You think Earl was a monster? Maybe, but he wasn't alone. Every county's got its secrets. He just kept better records." "Did you help him?" Reese stared at her. "I survived him." For a moment, silence filled the room like static. Then he said softly, "You dig too deep. You end up where she did." Mallory leaned forward. "Then tell me what he was protecting." Reese's eyes flicked toward the window, then back. There was someone bigger, Federal contracts, transport routes. Girls moved across state lines under official paperwork. Rankin handled Kansas, but he answered upward, always upward. Thompson's tone hardened. Who? Reese smiled thinly. You'll never print it. He's still alive. Before they could press further, a noise erupted outside. Shattering glass, then a flash. Mallory dropped behind the desk as the front window exploded inward. By the time the smoke cleared, Reese was slumped in his chair, a single gunshot wound to the chest. A bullet through silence. Outside, tire tracks veered into the dark. The official report called it a failed intimidation attempt, but Mallory knew it was cleanup. Someone was erasing the remaining witnesses, tightening the circle around the truth. That night, she sat in her motel room, recorder on the nightstand, dictating a memo to herself. If I disappear, she said quietly, look at the transport contracts filed between 1978 and 1983 under the name Midwest Road Solutions. They weren't building roads. They were moving people. She stopped the recording, hid the drive inside the lining of her bag, and turned off the lights. Sleep never came. At dawn, she drove out to the fields again. The road was empty, horizon pale gold. She parked near the ditch, the same one where Linda had been found. The wind carried a faint metallic smell, like rain on old iron. She crouched, running her hand through the grass. The earth had healed, but the ground still remembered. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. 4 words, you're closer than you think. Then a second message containing an address, no signature. She looked at the coordinates. It wasn't Emporia, it was Kansas City. A new lead, a new center of gravity. The cold case that began in a ditch was now pointing toward the state's beating heart, the intersection of politics, law enforcement, and disappearance. Mallory started the engine, eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind her, the memorial shimmered in the rearview mirror. White metal, black letters, small but unyielding. Somewhere ahead waited the last wall of silence, the one that didn't belong to the dead, but to the living, who profited from them. And as the sun rose over the highway, her reflection in the windshield looked like someone she no longer recognized. Not an investigator chasing ghosts, but the ghost that the powerful now feared. The address from the anonymous text led Aaron Mallory north, along the interstate where the plains gave way to concrete. Kansas City rose ahead. Glass, steel, sirens, a skyline that looked too clean to hold secrets. But every city has basements, and every basement keeps something it shouldn't. The coordinates pointed to an industrial lot on the edge of town, fenced off, half forgotten, its sign rusted, Midwest Road Solutions. She parked 2 blocks away and watched through binoculars. The place was alive again, trucks moving in and out, guards at the gate, clipboards, uniforms without insignia. Official enough to pass, unofficial enough to hide. The company Rankin once used was still breathing decades later. Only the names had changed. She recorded plate numbers, times, faces. Then she waited until night. The city around her pulsed with indifferent rhythm, bars closing, freight horns wailing in the distance. When the last truck rolled out, she climbed the fence. The air smelled of oil and ammonia. Inside the first warehouse, dust hung like fog. Rows of metal cabinets lined the walls, each labeled with logistics codes. Beneath one shelf, a stack of sealed crates marked Archive A13. She pried one open. Inside were boxes of driver manifests from the early 80s, dates overlapping the disappearances. And on every sheet, one column headed Cargo Verification. Most were blank. A few had initials, ER, SD, MR. Rankin, Dwyer, Reese. The ghosts were accounting for themselves. Her flashlight caught another detail. Handwritten notes at the margins. Transferred via Route 54 corridor. Inspection waived. Authorized by Fed Liaison, DR. She didn't know that name, but it was a new thread. Then she heard movement behind her, the creak of boots on concrete. She shut the light, crouched between crates, listening. 2 men, talking low. Got word the files were moved to Storage C. Who's checking inventory? Same crew. They said the detective's been sniffing around again. She won't last the week. The sound of a lighter, then footsteps fading. When silence returned, Mallory slipped out the side door, heart pounding, phone recording every second. She knew she couldn't call for backup. The local field office was already compromised. Instead, she uploaded the recording to a private cloud, locked it with a phrase only she would remember. For every name he buried. Back in her car, she drove to the edge of the river and parked under a bridge, watching the reflection of city lights fracture on the water. Every lead she touched turned to quicksand, each name tied to another. Rankin wasn't the origin. He was a node, a local enforcer for something larger that thrived under contracts and silence. By dawn, she was sitting in the Federal Liaison's office, showing her findings to Agent Thompson. He listened without interrupting, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. When she finished, he stood, closed the blinds, and said quietly, "You have no idea how deep this goes, do you?" "Then tell me," she said. Thompson leaned against the desk. Back in the 70s, the Bureau outsourced logistics for interstate narcotics stings. Some of those shipments weren't drugs, they were people. Witness transfers, informants, assets. The paperwork got blurred. Rankin ran protection for one of those routes. Somewhere along the line, the operation went dark. The people moving the assets stopped working for us. Mallory stared at him. You're saying federal cover? I'm saying federal blindness. Someone used our system to move victims, and when it fell apart, everyone looked the other way. The files you found could expose half the chain of command. That's why they're scared of you. Who's DR? Thompson hesitated. David Ross, retired deputy director. He lives in Arlington. He signed off on the original contracts. Then he's the next stop. Thompson sighed. You go to him, you go alone. Nobody official will back you. They'd rather let history rot than admit what they built. That night, she booked a flight under a false name. Before leaving, she visited Linda Brooks's grave one last time. The morning was gray, wind restless. She knelt beside the marker and whispered, "We're almost there." She didn't know if she meant the case or herself. In Virginia, the air smelled different. Wet leaves, bureaucracy, ghosts in marble halls. Ross lived in a gated suburb near the Potomac. His house was immaculate, white shutters, trimmed hedges, the kind of quiet only guilt can buy. She waited until dusk, then rang the bell. The man who opened the door was older than his photograph, thin, immaculate, eyes sharp behind glasses. "Detective Mallory," he said before she introduced herself. "I wondered when you'd come." He led her to a den lined with leather books and awards. "You've stirred quite a noise," he said. "Kansas hasn't seen this much attention since the Dust Bowl. Then you know why I'm here." Ross poured 2 glasses of bourbon. "Of course. You found Rankin's records. You think I authorized human trafficking through federal infrastructure. It's a compelling narrative." "Not a narrative," she said. "Evidence. Your signature appears on 5 transfer permits between 1979 and 1982. Every route matches a disappearance." He smiled faintly. "Evidence is a matter of interpretation. You see corruption, I see collateral." She set the recorder on the table. "Say that again." He didn't flinch. "Collateral. The late 70s were chaos. Post-Vietnam, organized crime exploding across the Midwest, informants vanishing. We built containment routes. Rankin handled disposal when containment failed." "Disposal?" "Bodies, detective. Problems. The kind the system can't publicly admit exist." Her throat tightened. "You're confessing to murder under federal sanction?" Ross swirled his drink. "I'm confessing to efficiency. You want to believe evil has a face. It doesn't. It has a process." Before she could respond, headlights flared through the window. 2 black SUVs pulling up silently. Ross glanced outside, unconcerned. "You should leave now. They're not here for me." The knock came hard, urgent. She grabbed the recorder and moved toward the back door, but Ross caught her wrist. "You think you're exposing a conspiracy," he said. "What you're exposing is infrastructure. The country runs on the things it refuses to see." She pulled free, slipped out the side exit, and ran into the yard. The night air burned cold. Voices shouted. A gunshot split the silence. She didn't look back. She vaulted the fence, hit the ground rolling, and sprinted toward the woods. Another shot, glass shattering, then only the sound of crickets and her heartbeat. She didn't stop until she reached the next street. Police sirens were already converging. She melted into the crowd, tossed her jacket, and kept moving. By the time she reached her motel, news was breaking. Former FBI Deputy Director David Ross found dead in apparent suicide. She stared at the screen. It was too clean, too fast. Another erasure, another message. When she replayed the recording, Ross's voice cut off seconds before the gunshot. Static swallowed the rest. She encrypted the file, sent copies to 3 journalists, including Mara Kendall. Then she packed, checked out, and headed for the airport. Back in Kansas, the fallout was nuclear. Ross's death ignited hearings, subpoenas, chaos. But amid the noise, something subtler happened. Files began disappearing from the digital archive. Entire cases erased overnight. The culvert evidence, the Midwest Road manifests, gone. Someone was rewriting history again, this time in real time. Mallory met Thompson in a parking garage beneath the federal building. "It's over," he said quietly. "Washington's shutting it down. National security classification, you and I are out." She laughed without humor. "National security? You mean national shame?" He handed her an envelope. "Inside's a new assignment. Chicago field office. Take it, start over." "And if I don't?" He looked at her the way people look at a gravestone. "Then you'll disappear like the rest." She drove out of the city, down the same road where everything began. The fields were bare now, winter frost glinting under moonlight. She stopped near the ditch, Linda's ditch, and got out. The memorial sign was bent by wind, but still standing. She touched it, the metal cold under her fingers. She thought of all the women in Rankin's photos. The ones without names, without graves, without stories. She thought of Ross's calm voice saying efficiency. She thought of every page burned, every tape erased. Then she opened the recorder still in her coat pocket. Ross's final words played faint through the static. "The country runs on the things it refuses to see." She looked across the dark horizon, the long silent road stretching ahead, and whispered, "Then let's make it look." In the distance, a single pair of headlights appeared, approaching, slow, deliberate. She didn't move. The car stopped beside her. The window lowered, Thompson's face in the dim light. "They're watching both of us now," he said. "If you want this truth to live, you'll have to bury it where they can't find it." She met his eyes. "Or dig until they can't cover it anymore," he sighed. "You're going to get yourself killed." Maybe, but not silent. The wind carried their words away. He handed her a flash drive. Backup of the culvert files. Hidden server. Don't use it yet. When the noise dies down, make it loud again. She took it without another word. The car drove off, disappearing into the black stretch of highway. She stood alone under the soundless sky, the flash drive warm in her hand like a pulse. The story was no longer about one girl in a ditch. It was about an entire system built on silence, and the one woman left willing to break it. And somewhere in that silence, she knew the road was still whispering the names of those who never made it home. The night she left Emporia, the air felt heavier than usual. It wasn't just the winter wind pressing against the windshield. It was the weight of what she carried. The flash drive Thompson had given her sat inside her jacket pocket, cold as a coin and twice as dangerous. She didn't know where to go, only that she couldn't go home. Her name was already circulating through internal memos labeled operational containment. She'd become a liability in a story that the system itself was desperate to erase. She drove west until the sky turned silver with dawn. Somewhere outside Salina, she pulled into a rest stop and sat for hours, watching the horizon flatten into silence. Every car that passed felt like a question. She hadn't slept in 2 days, hadn't eaten since the hospital coffee that morning. Fear had a taste now, metallic, like the edge of an old key. When she finally opened her laptop, she plugged in the flash drive. The folder tree unfolded like a map of buried sins. Culvert 1, Culvert 02, Midwest Log 1980, Transfers Conf. Each contained hundreds of encrypted PDFs, time-stamped, cataloged, signed with initials she'd seen before. Rankin, Reese, Dwyer, and more she hadn't. Dozens of officials whose names appeared in state payrolls and federal contracts. There were photographs, too. Victims transported across counties, escorted by officers, logged under protective custody. None of them had ever been seen again. She scrolled through until she found one labeled April 1981. Inside, 3 images. Linda Brooks in the back seat of a patrol car, alive. Her face was calm, unaware. The timestamp placed it 12 hours before her body was found. The man driving wasn't visible, but the shoulder patch reflected in the glass said it all. Sheriff's Department, Lyon County. Mallory's breath came shallow. The photo was proof Rankin had her alive in custody. Proof that what happened wasn't an accident or cover-up. It was abduction under authority. She copied everything onto an external drive, encrypted it again, and uploaded fragments to 3 separate servers under anonymous credentials. She didn't trust anyone, not even Thompson, especially not Thompson. In her line of work, trust was the first thing they taught you to weaponize. By the next afternoon, she was in Denver, renting a room under a false ID. She spent the evening drafting what she called the unofficial report. It wasn't evidence. It was a manifesto written like a case file. A story no one could own because everyone was complicit. She sent pieces of it to independent journalists, activists, and online archives. Some bounced back. Others disappeared into the web's quiet corners, where truth hides until someone brave enough digs it up. 3 days later, the first headline appeared on an underground blog, Federal Witness Transport Program linked to missing person scandal. Within hours, it spread. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The posts vanished, domains suspended, accounts deleted. The silence came back, faster this time, as if it had learned her rhythm. She checked her inbox. Hundreds of messages, some anonymous, some signed with initials. One stood out. The subject line read, "You're not alone." Inside was a single line of text, "Meet me where the road ends," and coordinates, the same stretch near Emporia where Linda Brooks had been found. It was a trap, she knew it, but it was also the only place left that felt real. She drove through the night. The town slept as she passed, gas stations dark, Main Street empty. When she reached the ditch, fog rolled low over the ground. The memorial sign glimmered faintly in her headlights. A single figure stood beside it, motionless. "Thompson," she said. He turned slowly, hands visible, no weapon. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "Then why send the message?" "I didn't." He stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold. "They're cleaning everything. The files, the witnesses, even me. I'm on the list now. They think I gave you that drive." "You did." "Not officially. There's a difference." Behind them, a low hum broke the silence. Engines approaching. 2 black SUVs, headlights off, rolling slow across the gravel. Thompson cursed under his breath. "Run!" She didn't. She grabbed his arm and dragged him toward the tree line. Gunfire cracked the air, muffled but precise. Bullets tore through the grass. They dove into the ditch, crawling through mud and weeds until they reached the old drainage tunnel, the same one where Linda's body had been found. Inside, the air was thick, suffocating. Thompson pressed his back against the wall, breathing hard. "They won't stop," he said, "not until every copy is gone." "I've hidden them," she said. 3 different servers. Then they'll burn 3 different buildings. Mallory shined her flashlight across the concrete, catching the faint outline of initials carved into the wall. LB 1981. Maybe graffiti, maybe a mark left by someone desperate to be remembered. She traced it with her fingers. "She's still here," she whispered. Thompson's voice cracked. "You don't understand. This was never about one victim. Rankin was part of an operation that moved people across borders. Test subjects, refugees, anyone unclaimed. It's why Ross called it infrastructure. They were building routes for bodies." The words hung heavy, soaked in dread. "And now?" she asked. "Now they're rebuilding it under new names." Outside, the engines grew louder. Flashlights swept across the field. Thompson reached for his sidearm. "You need to go." "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I've been running longer than you. Maybe it's time I stop." Before she could argue, he shoved her toward the tunnel's far exit. "Go," he said, raising his weapon. The gunfire started again, sharp, echoing against concrete. She ran, through mud, through roots, through the breathless dark. When she turned back, the ditch was aflame. The memorial sign burned like a torch. By morning, the news called it a gasoline explosion. No mention of Thompson, no mention of gunfire, just another anomaly in a file marked classified. She found herself in the motel outside Wichita, clothes still damp, mind racing. The flash drive was gone, lost during the escape. But she still had 1 copy left, the fragments she'd uploaded. She opened her laptop, logged into a private account, and found 1 server still active. The files were there, partially corrupted but intact, and in the metadata of 1 PDF, she saw a note she hadn't written. "Keep digging, Branch T." She stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. The message had been added less than an hour ago. Someone else had accessed the drive, someone still alive. The phone rang, unknown number again. She answered, breath tight. A woman's voice this time, calm, deliberate. "Detective Mallory?" "Who is this?" "You don't know me, but I know your work. My sister disappeared in 1979. I saw her face in the photos you leaked. You're not crazy. You're right. They're still out there." Mallory closed her eyes. "Where are you calling from?" "Kansas City. But I'm not the only one. There are families meeting tomorrow. People who've been waiting 40 years for someone to listen. Come, we'll tell you what the police never did." The line went silent before she could respond. That night, she sat on the motel bed, recorder in hand. Her voice was steady again, stripped of emotion. "Field memo, January 14th, she said. "Subject, persistence. The case remains open. The evidence may burn, but truth leaves ash." She stopped recording, looked out the window. The parking lot lights flickered, throwing long shadows across the asphalt. For the first time in months, she felt something close to resolve. The next day, she drove east again toward Kansas City. As she entered the outskirts, she passed an overpass marked with graffiti, "Justice for the Lost." The words looked new, fresh paint, still dripping. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was a signal. She found the address the woman had given. A community center on the edge of town. Inside, 20 people sat in folding chairs, faces pale but determined. They'd brought photos, letters, police reports, fragments of vanished lives. Mallory listened as they spoke. A sister missing from Topeka, a daughter from Oklahoma, a mother from Nebraska. Every story intersected with the same years, the same roots, the same logistics company. When they finished, she stood in front of them, voice low but fierce. "They built an empire out of our silence," she said. "It's time to take it back." Someone asked how. She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But outside, the sky was turning the color of rust. A Kansas sunset, bleeding into night. And in that light, she realized something. Maybe justice wasn't a verdict. Maybe it was persistence. The refusal to let the dead be erased twice. As she left the building, her phone buzzed again. A text. No name, just a photo. The burned ditch, taken hours earlier, still smoking. Below it, 4 words. "We found the drive." She stopped walking. The street was empty, quiet. Somewhere behind her, a car door shut. The story wasn't over. It was beginning again. The night Mallory met the families, something shifted. For years, she'd been fighting ghosts. Faceless names in classified reports. Voices erased from recordings. Now they had faces. Flesh and pulse and trembling hands holding photographs that smelled of dust and grief. 20 people in a room too small for the weight of their silence. Mothers with yellowing newspaper clippings. Brothers with badges they'd kept from old search parties. One father who still drove the highway every Sunday just to feel closer to the place where his daughter disappeared. They called themselves the 40-Year Circle. Someone had written the name on a paper sign taped to the wall. It wasn't an organization, not yet, just a gathering of those who refused to forget. Mallory stood at the front, coat still damp from the rain. They'll come for you, she said quietly. Once they know you've organized, they'll call you conspiracy theorists, attention seekers, anything to bury the story again. The room didn't flinch. A woman near the back, gray hair, eyes like broken glass, spoke first. We've already been buried. You just helped us crawl out. That was the beginning. Within days, the Circle started cataloging their own evidence. Missing persons reports, photos, letters. They built a private database hosted overseas, funded by small donations. Mallory became their anchor, the only one with access to law enforcement networks. She taught them how to cross-reference vehicle logs, to match dates against construction contracts, to trace the routes that linked Kansas to Missouri, to Oklahoma, to Texas. Every road pointed back to Midwest Road Solutions, and every discovery drew the Circle closer to danger. Anonymous emails arrived warning them to stop. 2 members reported being followed. One found his mailbox pried open, letters scattered like confetti. The local police claimed coincidence. Mallory knew better. She'd seen what coincidence looked like. It had tire marks and bullet holes. The Circle refused to back down. They began releasing information in waves, small enough to slip past digital censorship. A map of missing persons appeared on a whistleblower forum, then a list of contract numbers, then photographs of Rankin with federal officials at ribbon cuttings, smiling like nothing beneath their feet was built on bones. By the end of the month, the media could no longer ignore it. The Kansas corridor became a headline. Cable networks descended on Emporia again. The county board issued a statement calling for measured investigation. The FBI called it historic cooperation. But Mallory heard the tremor underneath those words, the system closing ranks. She met Mara Kendall again, her bandages gone, her voice still rough. They sat in a diner booth, the same one they'd used for every meeting since the beginning. They're running counter stories, Mara said, discrediting witnesses, editing search results. But it's leaking through. Every day more people ask questions. Mallory stirred her coffee. Questions aren't enough. They're a start. Outside, reporters clustered near parked vans. Someone had recognized Mallory's face through the window. Cameras flashed. The waitress turned the closed sign without being asked. Mara leaned closer. I've got a contact in Washington. Investigative division off record. He says there's talk of reopening internal files, but they need proof of continuity. Something that links the current infrastructure contracts to the old ones. Follow the money, Mallory murmured. Exactly, and we will, but we need protection. Someone's been leaking our meeting locations. Mallory looked at her reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, steady hands. If they're watching me, let them. It means they're afraid. That night, she drove back to her motel under a sky heavy with lightning. Thunder rolled across the plains like distant artillery. She parked, checked her mirrors. No cars behind. Still, the unease stayed. When she entered her room, the light was already on. On the table, another envelope waited. No return address. Inside, a single photo. It was the Circle's meeting room, taken from outside the window. She felt the blood drain from her hands. On the back, written in neat block letters, "You're building something you can't control." She tore the photo and flushed it down the sink. Then she sat in the dark until the rain eased. Somewhere between exhaustion and anger, she decided something simple. If they wanted to watch, she'd make sure the show burned. 2 days later, the Circle streamed a live conference online. No permission, no network, just a camera and conviction. They projected every document they'd verified. Transport lists, signatures, missing person overlaps. Mallory stood at the podium. "This isn't conspiracy," she said. "It's continuity. What began as one sheriff's crime became a system of disappearance. You can shut down servers, but you can't erase memory." The feed hit 200,000 views before it was pulled. Mirrors popped up instantly. The video spread through encrypted channels, foreign news outlets, classrooms. The silence cracked open like old asphalt. But retaliation was immediate. Federal subpoenas, national security designations, threats of imprisonment for data theft. Mara's newsroom was raided. One Circle member's car exploded outside his house, officially a fuel leak. Mallory went underground again, moving every night, using burner phones. The Circle fractured into smaller cells, each carrying pieces of the data. She carried the master key, a code to decrypt all of it, memorized, never written down. Then came the call she dreaded and hoped for. A private number, female voice, soft but firm. "Detective Mallory, this is Deputy Attorney General Coleman. We've been monitoring your investigation. You've exposed something bigger than you understand. We need to meet." They arranged to meet in Topeka, neutral ground, old state archives building after hours. Mallory arrived early. The building was empty except for a single guard who didn't look up as she entered. Coleman appeared exactly on time. Late 40s, precise posture, calm eyes. "You've made enemies," she said, "but also allies. Some of us inside the system want this uncovered." Mallory studied her. "And the rest?" "Want you erased. We can't stop that yet, but we can keep you alive if you cooperate." Cooperate how? Give us your encryption key. We'll secure the data, launch a controlled release. Mallory laughed softly. Controlled release? That's how this started. Control. Coleman didn't smile. You think martyrdom serves the victims? They need prosecution, not poetry. Mallory stepped closer. They need truth, not management. Lightning flared outside the tall windows. For a moment, both women stood in its ghostly light, two different kinds of believers staring at the same abyss. Coleman broke the silence first. If you walk out with that code, you won't make it a week. They're already tracking your location. Hand it over and I'll make sure the circle survives. Mallory shook her head. The circle isn't mine to trade. When she turned to leave, Coleman's voice followed her, low and certain. Then you'll force us to contain you. Outside, rain hammered the parking lot. A black SUV idled near her car. She kept walking, ignoring the shouts behind her, the growing hiss of tires on wet pavement. When she reached the edge of the lot, a man stepped from the shadows, hooded, drenched, holding a phone. Detective Mallory, he asked. Who's asking? Someone who used to build the roads. He handed her a flash drive, identical to the one she'd lost. They never stopped construction. The same company, different name. You'll find the new contracts there. Why give it to me? Because I buried them once. I'm done burying. Before she could respond, he disappeared into the rain. Back in her car, she plugged in the drive. Folders opened. Midwest Infrastructure 2025. Same format, same initials, same routes, except this time the destinations were federal detention centers, migrant facilities, medical transport units. The machinery of disappearance reborn under new branding. She closed her eyes. History wasn't repeating, it was upgrading. She copied the files, encrypted them with her key, and sent them to every Circle member at once. Her message was brief. Publish everything. No redactions, no waiting. Then she tossed her phone into the river. By morning, the files were everywhere. News outlets scrambled. Officials denied. Agencies launched independent reviews. Coleman went on television promising accountability. The Circle's site crashed under traffic, and somewhere in that chaos, Mallory vanished. No record of her check-ins, no trace of her car, only one final voicemail to Mara Kendall, time-stamped at 3:12 a.m. Mara, if you're hearing this, don't look for me. Keep the story alive. When the system rebuilds, make them remember the foundation. Tell them truth doesn't disappear, it migrates. The line cut. Days later, the Kansas River flooded from heavy rain, washing debris through miles of farmland. Among the wreckage, search teams found a single object lodged between two stones, a badge, worn smooth, the number barely visible. It wasn't Rankin's, it was hers. For weeks, speculation filled the airwaves. Some said she was dead, others said she'd gone into witness protection. The Circle kept working, quiet, methodical, guided by the files she'd left behind. Every anniversary, they gathered at the ditch where it all began, laying new flowers under the memorial sign. Beneath Linda Brooks's name, someone had carved another line, for the ones who refused silence. And though the wind never stops in Kansas, on those days it carries something different, an echo of a voice that once said, the case remains open, the evidence may burn, but truth leaves ash. Because in the end, the ash is all that's left of fire, and sometimes it's enough to light the dark again. By the spring that followed her disappearance, the country had changed shape, not on any map, not in the borders, but in the air. A low-grade hum of distrust ran beneath every headline. The Kansas corridor had become shorthand for everything the nation didn't want to believe about itself. The Circle's data dumps kept surfacing on mirrored sites faster than agencies could erase them. The files were messy, half-redacted, misdated, but every fragment carried a pulse of truth. And in that pulse, people began to march. It started small. Vigils on courthouse steps, candles flickering in mason jars, photographs of the missing held against the wind. Then the marches spread. St. Louis, Dallas, Denver, Portland. Banners reading "No More Silent Highways." At first, the media called it hysteria. Then the government called it civil disruption. But when thousands gathered outside the Department of Justice carrying Linda Brooks's portrait, no one could pretend it was just folklore anymore. Inside federal buildings, the scramble turned desperate. Committees formed overnight. Names changed. Programs rebranded. Midwest Infrastructure Holdings became Continental Transit Solutions. New logos, same corridors. But the public wasn't fooled. Leaked memos showed fresh contracts approved under emergency clauses, proof that the machine still turned. Mara Kendall became the reluctant face of it all. Her voice, once cracked by smoke and exhaustion, now filled airwaves. She hosted late-night briefings streamed from undisclosed locations, reading lines from Mallory's recovered notes. "Justice isn't a department," she quoted one night. "It's an act of memory." The phrase went viral, painted on walls, printed on protest shirts, whispered by students who had been children when the ditch was just a rumor. Yet while the streets grew louder, the institutions grew quieter. Indictments stalled, grand jury proceedings vanished into sealed chambers. The Circle's members were subpoenaed, harassed, audited. 2 of them went missing within a week. Official statements called them relocated for safety. The others stopped answering calls. Mara lived with the paranoia Mallory once described, the feeling that truth has footsteps. Every knock at the door made her heart jump. Still, she kept broadcasting. Every night, one more leak, one more voice refusing to fade. And then, one April morning, a package arrived at her temporary studio. No postage, no return label. Inside was a recorder, Mallory's old model, scarred and dented, the same kind the detective used for field memos. When Mara pressed play, static filled the room. Then a voice, unmistakably hers, rougher but alive. Field memo, March 17th, subject, survival. A pause, wind in the background. If you're hearing this, the story's bigger than Kansas. I'm still moving. Don't look for me. Look for what they built after I disappeared. The name you want is Project Reroute. It's the new skin of the old road. Static again, then a faint click. End of tape. Mara sat frozen. Alive. Somewhere out there, Aaron Mallory was still running, still chasing ghosts through the veins of the country. She released the recording that night. Within hours, it became the most shared audio in America. Commentators argued about authenticity. Analysts slowed the waveform, dissected the wind noise, the pauses. The FBI issued no statement. But someone leaked travel records showing a series of unmarked flights between Wichita and El Paso labeled reroute testing. The connection was too clean to ignore. By summer, congressional hearings were inevitable. The circle, what was left of it, was called to testify. Mara took the stand beneath harsh white lights. Cameras broadcast every word. She recited the story the way Mallory had written it, from the ditch to the shelter to the culvert to the corridors of power. When asked about her source, she smiled faintly. Truth, she said, has no forwarding address. The committee chair frowned. You're under oath, Ms. Kendall. Where is Detective Mallory? Mara looked directly into the camera lens. Everywhere you tried not to look. Outside, crowds roared. Inside, pens scratched across legal pads that would later vanish into archives no one could access. The hearings ended without verdict. But something irreversible had already happened. The illusion of order had cracked. That autumn, the protests became ritual. Every October 14th, the day Linda Brooks was found, people gathered along rural highways, lining the shoulders with shoes. Hundreds, then thousands of pairs, each one labeled with a name and a year. Reporters called it the Walk of Ashes. Farmers slowed their trucks to watch. Families knelt by the roadside, tying ribbons to fence posts. Somewhere, the wind carried the faint hum of engines from faraway transport convoys, the past still moving beneath their feet. And then, almost quietly, sightings began. Grainy photos from Wyoming, Oregon, Tennessee, women claiming to have seen a figure who fit Mallory's description. Same jacket, same scar along the jaw, always alone, always walking near highways. No confirmation, no interviews, just shadows at the edge of light. Mara never said whether she believed them, but every time a new image surfaced, she smiled the same private smile, as if hearing an inside joke whispered by fate. A year after the first leak, the government released its final report. No evidence of ongoing wrongdoing. Historic misconduct limited to deceased individuals. The document was 612 pages long and said nothing at all. But page 613 was blank, and that blank page became legend. People printed it, framed it, carried it at marches, writing the names of the missing across its surface. Absence had become testimony. Emporia changed too. The ditch was fenced off, designated a memorial site. A bronze plaque replaced the metal sign. Linda Brooks, 1981, justice deferred. On weekends, strangers left notes folded beneath the plaque. Most began the same way. I didn't know her, but... One night, a storm rolled through the plains. Lightning struck the memorial fence, shattering part of it. In the morning, a maintenance worker found something lodged in the mud near the damage, a waterproof envelope containing a photograph. It showed Mallory standing beside the same plaque, years older, rain streaming down her face. On the back, 5 words written in her hand, "The road remembers everything." The photo was delivered anonymously to Mara. She released it without commentary. The image went viral, but the location metadata was corrupted. Whether it was recent or years old, no one could tell. The myth grew. Some said Mallory worked overseas under a new name, hunting similar programs in other countries. Others claimed she'd vanished into the underground networks she once exposed, living among the witnesses she'd saved. Maybe both were true. As the years rolled on, the story no longer belonged to investigators or journalists. It belonged to classrooms, documentaries, podcasts, late-night conversations. The Kansas cold case became a phrase people used when talking about hidden systems, politics, faith, power. It became folklore wrapped in fact, the kind of legend that warns and wounds at once. And yet, beneath the noise, the core remained the same. A girl in a ditch, a detective who refused to stop, a country forced to look at its reflection. In that reflection, everyone saw something different. Some saw guilt, others redemption, but no one could say they hadn't seen. Mara grew older, her hair streaked with gray, her voice steadier than ever. She still ended every broadcast the same way. For Linda Brooks, for Aaron Mallory, for every name the road still carries. The screen would fade to black, but the echo lingered low and human, like a heartbeat under static. And somewhere far away, maybe on another nameless highway, a woman would hear that echo and smile to herself before fading again into the endless American horizon. Because some stories don't close, they keep driving mile after mile on roads that never forget. By the time the second anniversary of the leak arrived, the story no longer belonged to Kansas. It belonged to the world. The footage, the files, the names, they had crossed borders like contraband truth. In Europe, newspapers printed Mallory's photograph beneath headlines about state-backed disappearances. In South America, protest walls bore stencils of Linda Brooks's face next to words in Spanish. La carretera nunca olvida. The road never forgets. What began as an investigation into a forgotten murder had mutated into an international reckoning. Governments issued statements, half condemning, half evading. The United Nations formed a commission on transnational logistical abuse. The U.S. delegation abstained from voting on its own inquiry, and all across the globe, citizens began asking the same question. If it could happen in Kansas, where else was it happening right now? The myth of Detective Aaron Mallory fed that fire. Her name appeared in graffiti from Warsaw to Sao Paulo, whispered at rallies, printed on banners carried through city squares. Mallory lives became a slogan, sometimes defiant, sometimes mournful, sometimes both. No one knew if she was alive. That was the power of it. She'd become the ghost every system feared, the investigator who wouldn't die, the conscience that refused erasure. Mara Kendall watched it unfold from her small apartment in Chicago, the walls covered in clippings and maps. She had become both archivist and witness. She didn't chase stories anymore. They came to her. Letters arrived daily, each sealed with desperate hope. Some contained proof, stolen documents, transport manifests, even military invoices marked reroute or expedite. Others held nothing but pain, a few words scrawled across torn notebook paper. They took my sister in 1992. My brother was last seen in a government van. Tell Mallory she was right. One morning, an envelope arrived with no stamp, no address. Inside was a single photograph of a shipping container yard somewhere overseas. One crate was marked with a symbol, an unbroken circle, the 40-year circle. On the back, a note written in neat block letters. They've gone global, Europe, Asia, same routes, new names. Mara traced the shipping code through customs databases. It led to a company registered in Singapore, Continental Recovery Logistics, a subsidiary of a U.S. contractor once linked to Midwest Road Solutions. The circle had turned international. She called every contact she had left. Most refused to speak on record. Some sounded terrified. A few didn't answer at all, but one did. An analyst working for a European intelligence agency. His voice was low, hurried. You need to understand, he said. They're not transporting victims anymore. They're transporting witnesses, whistleblowers, refugees, anyone inconvenient. The system evolved. How deep? She asked. Deeper than governments, it's become infrastructure, a shadow supply chain, the same blueprints, the same contractors, now privatized and protected by international trade law. You can't stop it, you can only expose it. He hung up before she could reply. That night, Mara drafted a new expose, compiling every thread that linked the Kansas investigation to the modern network. She titled it The Silent Roads. Before publishing, she added one final line, dedicated to Detective Aaron Mallory, wherever the road has taken her. The article detonated. Within 48 hours, it reached millions of readers. News anchors debated its validity. Governments denied everything. Anonymous hackers released supporting documents. An audio clip surfaced. A woman's voice speaking English with a faint Midwestern accent. You can't kill the road, it said. You can only choose which side to stand on. Experts claimed it was Mallory. Others said it was AI generated. No one could prove either. In the weeks that followed, protests erupted at U.S. embassies abroad. Demonstrators lined highways with candles. Truck drivers in Poland refused to transport government cargo. Port workers in Chile painted white circles on shipping containers. The movement had no leader, no organization, just a rhythm that moved from one heart to another. And then, almost quietly, a new set of files appeared online. This time encrypted with a phrase only one person would have used for every name he buried. Inside were hundreds of records, contracts, images, letters, some dated from Rankin's era, others as recent as 2025. They connected global logistics to private security firms, refugee transfers, pharmaceutical shipments, every line of the old conspiracy reborn in modern disguise. The upload came from an IP address in Bucharest. Mara stared at the screen for a long time before whispering, "She's alive." Within days, another message appeared, buried in the metadata of the files. The road continues east. Across the Atlantic, journalists began chasing sightings. In Romania, a grainy CCTV capture showed a woman in a gray coat boarding a train to Istanbul. In Turkey, a customs officer reported a woman matching Mallory's description entering a restricted freight terminal. No follow-up, no exit stamp. The myth deepened. Some believed she was dismantling the network from within, tracing its routes across continents. Others believed she'd become part of it, a ghost moving through its veins to keep watch. Governments issued denials. Intelligence agencies whispered her name in closed briefings. To the public, she was already legend, a reminder that systems may bury truth, but they can't bury persistence. Meanwhile, in Kansas, the circle endured, smaller now, quieter, but unbroken. Each member carried a piece of the archive, hidden in encrypted drives, safe deposit boxes, even written by hand in notebooks disguised as diaries. Every October 14th, they still met at the ditch. The field had grown over, but the air still carried the same stillness. On the memorial plaque, more names had been engraved. Victims from other states, other decades, all connected by the same invisible road. Mara returned that year, camera crew in tow. The footage she filmed was simple, old hands lighting candles, a teenager reading names aloud, the wind pushing through wheat like breath through lungs. She didn't speak on camera. She didn't need to. The silence said everything. When she returned to Chicago, an envelope waited on her doorstep. No sender. Inside, a flash drive. On it, one video file. Field memo, Ankara. She pressed play. The image flickered. Handheld, filmed at night. A figure stood on a rooftop overlooking a maze of cargo cranes. Wind whipped against the mic. Then the camera tilted, revealing her face in the glow of a distant fire. Older, thinner, eyes sharper but alive. Erin Mallory. Her voice was steady. It didn't end in Kansas, she said. It just changed languages. The routes are the same, only the cargo changes. They move data now. Information, people, power, but the pattern never dies, because the pattern isn't a crime scene, it's a blueprint. She looked directly into the lens. If this reaches you, tell them, truth doesn't belong to nations. It belongs to whoever dares to carry it across borders. The camera shook, turning toward the harbor lights. A siren wailed in the distance. Then static. Mara sat in silence long after the video ended. She uploaded it to the Circle's archive, but didn't release it publicly. Not yet. Some truths needed time to settle before they burned. Months passed. Governments cracked down on leaks. Journalists were detained. New digital security laws criminalized unauthorized disclosure. But the movement didn't fade. It adapted, spreading through art, through songs, through whispers. Highways across the world bore graffiti of the same phrase, truth leaves ash. And every now and then, a fresh file appeared online. A new route, a new list, a new wound. Each one tagged with the same signature, EM. No one knew where she sent them from. Some said Eastern Europe, some South America, some places no map marked anymore. But every time the initials appeared, somewhere, another road was forced to stop and look at itself. Because that was her final gift, the contagion of awareness, the idea that justice wasn't a verdict sealed by courts or archives, but a living, shifting pursuit, forever unfinished. And somewhere out there, on another highway cut through another country, a gray sedan might pull over at dawn, its driver stepping out to watch the sun rise over asphalt that has carried too many secrets. She might stand there for a moment, listening to the hum beneath the road, engines, echoes, ghosts, and whisper the same words she once carved into steel. The road remembers everything. Then she'd disappear again, swallowed by motion, by silence, by the very system she spent her life unmasking, leaving only traces like tire marks on wet ground, impossible to preserve, impossible to erase. And long after she's gone, when someone somewhere uncovers another file, another name, another truth that refuses burial, they'll say the same words the Circle once said in that small Kansas room. We've already been buried. She just helped us crawl out. Because Erin Mallory never wanted to be a hero. She wanted to prove that even in a country built on forgetting, one voice, steady, relentless, human, could still make the world remember. By the third year after the Kansas leak, the movement had outgrown the people who started it. It moved like weather, everywhere at once, impossible to contain. Governments changed their slogans, corporations changed their logos, and the world kept driving on roads built by ghosts. But beneath the noise, something new was forming, a convergence. A date whispered across encrypted channels, written in chalk on protest walls. October 14th, the day the first body was found, the day everything began. The message was simple. On the anniversary, every route goes dark. No one knew who planned it, no headquarters, no manifesto, just a promise that on that single day, truckers, port workers, data technicians, and infrastructure operators across dozens of countries would shut down every artery that once carried silence. A digital strike against the system itself. They called it Black Highway Day. Mara Kendall watched it unfold from her apartment, curtains drawn, phone buzzing nonstop. Networks speculated about foreign interference, extremist sabotage, economic warfare. She said nothing. She had learned that real revolutions don't shout, they hum. Somewhere beneath the chatter, she sensed the rhythm, the same quiet pulse that had started in a Kansas ditch 40-plus years ago. 2 nights before the strike, a secure message reached her inbox. Sender, EM. Subject, final mile. The body read only one line. If you want to see what they built, follow the lights east of Odessa. Attached was a live feed link. Mara clicked. Grainy night vision footage appeared, endless rows of shipping containers on a coastal plain illuminated by halogen towers. Every few seconds the image flickered, the camera struggling to adjust. Then a shadow crossed the frame. Tall, slender, unmistakable. Erin Mallory, alive, wearing a windbreaker marked inspection crew. She turned toward the lens for an instant, and even through the static her eyes looked the same. Alert, exhausted, unbroken. The feed cut to black. Then text appeared across the screen, auto-typed. October 14th, cut the signal. And just like that, she was gone again. Mara didn't sleep. She wrote through the night, piecing together every lead the Circle had left. Shipping manifests, offshore accounts, satellite images of new logistical corridors. At dawn, she went live, streaming to millions. This isn't a protest, she said, voice steady. It's a reset. The road doesn't end in Kansas anymore. It ends wherever you choose to look away. The countdown began. At midnight, UTC port cranes froze. Freight convoys pulled to the shoulders. Air traffic beacons blinked off for 60 terrifying seconds, just long enough to remind the world how dependent it was on silence. Data pipelines slowed, servers overloaded, and on every major news network the same phrase appeared for exactly 1 minute: truth leaves ash. Then the screens went dark. For 12 hours the planet stalled. Governments panicked, economies bled, but the sky didn't fall. When systems rebooted, something else replaced the usual advertising loops. Footage from Mallory's archive, hundreds of hours of classified transport operations, faces, documents, timestamps, every nation implicated, every route exposed. No one knew who triggered the upload. Some said hackers, some said her, but buried in the code that distributed the files was one unmistakable fingerprint, metadata tagged EM114. The flood was irreversible. Servers tried to block it, mirrors multiplied it. Within a day, the entire infrastructure of concealment was naked. Private contractors collapsed overnight. Cabinet ministers resigned. The world saw in painful detail how its comfort had been paved with the erased. In Washington, emergency committees convened. The president addressed the nation at dusk, voice trembling behind teleprompter glass. What began as a tragedy in Kansas has revealed an infection in our systems, he said. We will cooperate with international investigators. We will restore transparency. But even as he spoke, power flickered in the building. The broadcast cut mid-sentence. Across the Atlantic, similar chaos. Servers seized, archives purged, executives fleeing, yet every deletion spawned 10 backups elsewhere. Mallory had planned for redundancy better than any intelligence service. The Circle, reborn now as millions, had become a self-replicating conscience. And then, amid the avalanche of documents, a final file surfaced. Field memo, final.mp4, uploaded from an unknown node at the exact minute the global blackout ended. Mara opened it first. The video began with wind, low, constant. The camera steadied on a coastal cliff at dawn. The horizon burned faint orange. Mallory stood facing it, hair whipping across her face. Her voice was soft, almost detached. This was never about the girl in the ditch, she said. It was about the ground that kept swallowing others after her. We keep paving over what we can't bear to face. Every time we rebuild, we lay another layer of forgetfulness. She paused, looking directly into the lens. I didn't survive to be remembered. I survived so remembering would be impossible to stop. Behind her, lights flared along the coastline, rows of containers igniting one after another, controlled detonations blooming like sunrise. She turned once more toward the camera. If they burn everything, let them. Fire is just another way to write truth into the air. The feed shook violently, then froze on her silhouette against the flames. The last frame stayed for 10 seconds before cutting to black. That clip traveled faster than any news broadcast. Within hours, it appeared on every platform, mirrored in every language. Analysts confirmed it was genuine. The coordinates matched the same Odessa terminal shown in the leak. Satellite images later revealed the site completely destroyed, consumed by a chain of explosions no one claimed responsibility for. No remains were found. But one charred metal badge recovered near the blast bore the initials EM. The world reacted the only way it could, by mythologizing her. Streets renamed, documentaries produced. Politicians invoked her in speeches they barely understood. Some called her a criminal, others a saint. But the truth resisted translation. It lived somewhere between martyrdom and movement, between what she'd done and what she'd made possible. Weeks later, as investigations circled endlessly, a package arrived at Mara's newsroom. Inside, a small drive wrapped in waterproof tape, a handwritten note in familiar ink. There's no such thing as closure, only continuation. The drive contained coordinates spanning 5 continents, new facilities, hidden labs, refugee routes disguised as commerce. Evidence that the system, wounded but alive, was adapting again. Mallory had mapped its next shape before she vanished. Her final act wasn't destruction, it was instruction. Mara released the map under one sentence. The road begins again. It became the closing line of her book, the one that would win every award and still feel unfinished. Because endings were never what this story wanted. Years later, when historians wrote about the Kansas cold case, they debated whether Mallory truly died in that explosion. Some claimed she escaped by sea. Others swore she lived under another name, feeding new leaks through anonymous networks. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that the world she'd forced to see could never fully close its eyes again. In Emporia, the memorial grew taller each year. Bronze faces, etched names, flowers. The plaque now read, Linda Brooks, 1981 Erin Mallory, 2026 for every name the road still carries. On quiet mornings, truckers still pull over, leaving their boots beside the ditch. Students record documentaries, journalists quote her last words, but those who were there remember something different. Not the fire, not the footage, but the feeling of a silence finally broken, a breath finally exhaled after 4 decades of holding it in. Some nights, locals say they see headlights along the old road, a single car moving slow, stopping where the memorial stands. The engine never turns off, no one steps out. Then it drives away, taillights disappearing into fog. Maybe it's a ghost, maybe it's just memory learning how to move forward. Either way, the story doesn't end. It never could, because somewhere beyond every border, someone is still following those coordinates, still whispering her mantra under their breath. The road remembers everything. The years that followed did not bring peace, only perspective. The fire in Odessa became the last footage most people ever saw of Erin Mallory, and with time, the image turned mythic. The world kept moving, as it always does, but the roads carried something heavier now. Not fear, not guilt, awareness. An invisible freight of memory running parallel to the everyday hum of engines and radio static. In Kansas, the ditch off County Road 17 no longer looked like a crime scene. It was neat, quiet, bordered by wildflowers that refused to die no matter how many times the wind flattened them. A paved pull-off marked the spot, lined with plaques. Linda Brooks, 1981. Erin Mallory, 2026. The road remembers everything. Some nights, truckers still stopped there. They'd cut their engines, sit in silence for a while, staring into the grass. No one spoke. No one had to. In their mirrors, the memorial lights flickered like distant headlights, small, steady, enduring. Inside the local diner, a faded newspaper hung in a frame above the counter. New evidence ends decades-old Kansas cold case. The edges had yellowed, the ink blurred, but the headline still drew eyes. Beneath it, a handwritten note from the owner read, "We don't forget her here." The 40-year circle never disbanded. It changed shape, like water adapting to the ground that holds it. The remaining members aged quietly, passing the archive down like a family heirloom. What began as grief became curriculum. High schools across the Midwest now taught the Kansas Inquiry, a civic course built around ethics, oversight, and the anatomy of silence. Students watched clips from Mallory's memos, read the transcripts of her testimony, debated the balance between law and conscience. And somewhere in every classroom, one student always asked the same question: do you think she survived? No teacher ever answered. They didn't need to. In Chicago, Mara Kendall's voice became something close to sacred. Her final broadcast aired 5 years after the Odessa fire, a quiet farewell filmed in a dim studio lined with maps. Her hair was silver now, her voice softened by time, but the resolve never faded. Stories don't end, she said. They change narrators. Mallory understood that. Linda understood that. Maybe the rest of us are still learning. She paused, eyes on the camera. Some of you write to ask if justice was ever served. I don't know how to answer that. Maybe justice isn't a verdict. Maybe it's the persistence of memory, the refusal to let the road go quiet again. After she signed off, the screen faded to black, then to a single sentence in white letters, for every name they tried to erase. That broadcast played on loop at the memorial site for years. Travelers stopped to listen. Children asked who the woman on the screen was. Parents explained, or tried to. The story had become folklore now, but folklore with evidence, faith with footnotes. The federal report released in 2030 officially closed the case. All persons of interest deceased, infrastructure reforms enacted. No further investigation warranted. A sterile paragraph sealing decades of chaos. The world called it closure. The circle called it punctuation. The truth had simply moved elsewhere. And somewhere far from Kansas, in a coastal village where the sea met forgotten rail lines, a woman with gray hair and quiet eyes rented a small room overlooking the water. She called herself Ellen Moore. She never stayed long enough for anyone to ask questions. She walked the shoreline each morning barefoot, leaving prints that the tide erased within minutes. Sometimes she would sit at an outdoor cafe reading the local paper. Once, the front page carried a story about a new international tribunal on logistical accountability. The headline quoted her old words, "Truth leaves ash." She smiled, folded the paper, and left a few coins under her cup. That night she wrote in a notebook, a habit she'd never broken. The pages were filled with coordinates, sketches of maps, names of journalists in countries she'd never visited. At the top of the page she wrote, "Continuation." Outside, the harbor lights flickered. A cargo ship moved slowly toward the horizon, its hull painted with a familiar emblem, a circle unbroken. She watched it until it disappeared into fog. Some say she died there, quietly, anonymous at last. Others say she boarded that ship and kept moving, the way stories do when they're not finished. No one knows. But every few years, new files surface, structured, encrypted, always signed with the same tag, EM. Each contains fragments of truth from places the news has already forgotten. Camps, borders, backroads. The same pattern, the same insistence. And every time one appears, the world remembers her all over again. In Emporia, they hold a candlelight walk every October. People drive from neighboring states to stand along the old highway, holding lanterns instead of phones. The wind always rises at dusk, sweeping through the wheat fields, carrying with it the soft rattle of dried stems. The sound the locals now call the whisper. Some say it's just the prairie breathing. Others say it's the road speaking back. This year, a teenage girl named Clara Brooks, a distant relative of Linda's, walked the entire route alone, from the old sheriff's office to the memorial. She carried a recorder and spoke as she walked. "They said the case is closed," she said into the wind. "But I don't believe in closed roads. Every mile has something left behind." Her voice carried, blending into the night, merging with the hum of distant traffic. Later, she placed her recorder at the foot of the memorial, pressed play, and let it run. The voices of passers-by layered together, laughter, prayer, silence. When the batteries died, the light from the recorder blinked twice and went dark, but the road stayed alive with sound. Across the world, highways began adopting new signs. Small plaques at rest stops, engraved with a single line, dedicated to those who listened. Truckers posted photos online, each one captioned, "The road remembers." A simple phrase, universal and unclaimed. Because that's what remained after all the evidence, all the politics, all the noise. Not a verdict, not even a name, just the act of remembering. And in the end, maybe that was the only justice possible. Not the kind written in court transcripts or carved into marble, but the kind that lives in the ordinary. A mother teaching her child why silence can be dangerous, a reporter refusing to cut a story short, a stranger stopping by a roadside memorial to read the names aloud before driving on. Somewhere the wind shifts, carrying the faint hum of an engine on a distant road. A woman drives alone through the night, headlights carving narrow paths through fog. She listens to an old broadcast playing through static, Mara Kendall's final sign-off. She smiles, not because she believes in closure, but because she believes in continuity. The road ahead is long, endless, alive. And as dawn breaks over the horizon, painting the sky the same color as the ditch water from that first morning in 1981, she whispers, maybe to herself, maybe to the world that keeps forgetting. Truth leaves ash, and ash is proof that something once burned bright. The car disappears down the highway, the wind carries the echo, and the road remembers everything.